Snooze. A story of awakening. For my beloved peeps, who inspired and encouraged this tale. I Chuangcho dreamed I was a butterfly, fluttering hither and thither, for all intents and purposes a butterfly. I was conscious only of my happiness as a butterfly, unaware I was Cho. Soon I awakened, and there I was, myself again. Now I do not know whether I was a man, dreaming I was a butterfly, or whether I am a butterfly, dreaming I am a man. Zhuangzi. Snooze, A Story of Awakening. By Sol Luckman. Part 1. Dreams. Chapter 1. As a kid, Max often dreamed of flying. Not that he always remembered his dreams, but the ones he managed to wrest, often in fragments, like bits of sand dollars washed ashore from the aquatic world of deep sleep, invariably involved flight. Sometimes he was a passenger aboard some kind of craft, such as a fighter jet or the space shuttle. Fittingly, his father had been born aloft high above the Earth's surface both ways. Virtually everything Max could remember about his father, Captain Thomas Diver, Navy pilot, and celebrated NASA astronaut, had to do with flying, starting with the occasional spin in the captain's private Cessna out over the Everglades or down around the Keys. There were the model airplanes gifted for birthdays and Christmases, the two of them, so alike in their attention to detail, painstakingly pieced together and painted. There were the elaborate paper planes and jets, like flying origami, often featuring complex designs in ink, left by the Tooth Fairy or Easter Bunny. And of course, Max would never forget the kites they designed, assembled and flew together for hours on end, like condors riding endless thermal currents, out over the breezy gulf beyond Cape Carnival. With the squish of sand underfoot and the salty wind in his hair, squinting in the sunlight, chest thumping with excitement, Max would work the string to his father's exhortations, higher, faster, while feeling absolutely in the right place at the right time. Years later, even after graduating salutatorian and enrolling at an Ivy League university, kite flying remained Max's signature memory of his father, preserving a feeling of fleeting bliss, one that, like an imperfect but beautiful crystal, was created only to be shattered. Naturally, there were dreams that didn't include his father. Most of them, actually. Alone, Max had parasailed high above turquoise waves, hang glided over tropical forests, sailed over rugged canyonlands in hot air balloons. Such dreams were indeed captivating. Still, the dreams Max loved best involved no special equipment, no technological support, no hitching an aerial ride, no crutch. These were the dreams where he himself flew. Actually flew. No sails needed. No wings necessary. No engine required. No wheel, no stick, no throttle to interfere with the purity of the experience. In defiance of gravity, or maybe somehow working with gravity, he would simply lift off. There was hardly any effort required. Or if there was effort, it wasn't of a physical kind, it was entirely mental. It was like meditation. Though he didn't know a lot about meditation in those days. Later, as a young man beginning to grasp intellectually what he had started doing naturally, he would jokingly refer to the process as meditation. Flying in his dreams was an exhilarating, breathtaking experience, sometimes literally, that tended to leave reality wanting, like riding a roller coaster compared to mowing the lawn. His dreaming heart fluttered like a sparrow as his body rose up out of bed and hovered in midair, head almost touching the ceiling, for a few seconds or minutes. Sometimes it took a while to recall how to direct his flight. The steps involved first intending to go somewhere, then allowing himself to go, then actually moving, mentally, in the opposite direction. As he came to understand the weird, counterintuitive mechanics of dreams, Max discovered that down was up was down, right was left, and left was right. When he was a pre-med student studying anything but medicine, he would also learn that in the world of dreams, outside was inside and inside was outside. Not only that, but in the world it was possible to access through dreams, time was no arrow shooting forward, as it seems to be here, but a traversable landscape. In such dreams taking place in a parallel reality mirroring our own, to simplify things somewhat, your current location is the present, the past lies behind you, and the terrain ahead is the future. But as a kid dreaming of his own world, Max knew none of such finer navigational points that applied to the dream world beyond. There was no pressing need, and in any case, grasping that in inverse reality dreams, feeling and intuition are physical senses, while sight, hearing, touch, and the like are more like hunches, would have been like studying calculus before mastering arithmetic. As a kid just dreaming, all that really mattered to Max was knowing how to move about, which required only the rule of opposites. To be a flyer, he soon realized he had to be a diver. A joke that wasn't lost on Maxwell Andrew Diver, an uncommon boy not only in his abilities but also in his intelligence, even at a tender age. At which point, diving, he would zoom out the window. Physical barriers usually posed no obstacle in dreams, and dart up and off like Superman in pajamas in the direction of his desire. Chapter 2. Wake up, Snooze. You don't want to be late for school again. His father's baritone urging was accompanied by the comforting smell of Old Spice and the firm, warm pressure of his large, manly hand on Max's forearm. Snooze was an old nickname, bestowed on him when he was just a toddler by his father, who possessed a kind, if wry, sense of humor. Max had justly earned the epithet. As a boy, he slept as much and as often as he could, and literally could fall asleep anywhere, anytime if he put his mind to it. Concerned that his son might have an illness, Max's father had once taken him to see a specialist, a Navy doctor considered an expert in sleep disorders, a man named Dr. Morrow with a vaguely European accent, angular features, and owl eyes behind round, wire-rimmed glasses. Max spent a surreal night in the Navy hospital undergoing an array of scans and tests, with scads of electrodes attached like tentacles to his little body. But even under these difficult circumstances, he was able to fall asleep easily and remain so until morning. Dr. Morrow concluded that Max didn't suffer from narcolepsy or hypersomnia, though there were some anomalous readings in his results, indicating extremely heightened brain activity during sleep. Max remembered Dr. Morrow removing his glasses and biting one of the silvery arms in a perplexed gesture as he commented in low tones to his father, "Honestly, Thomas, I haven't seen anything like it. But I don't think your son is sick. To the contrary." To the contrary? His father had said. Let's just say he's gifted. Until this moment, Max had never thought of himself as particularly gifted. If anything, his propensity for sleep, as much as he loved to doze, was often a burden. This was especially true on school mornings when his father awoke him in the middle of a riveting dream. His dreams were always at their most vivid toward morning, when he entered the deep, visionary rhythms of REM sleep. Eyes rolling like magic marbles behind his eyelids, moving faster and faster as his flight speed increased, often he would find himself high above the earth, which resembled a blue-green ball on a vast carpet of black velvet. Occasionally, if his velocity managed to reach what he came to think of as critical mass, there would be a flickering followed by a tremendous flash of light, like an electric strobe exploding. Once or twice, he actually found himself at the edge of what seemed to be a different world. But this was as far as it ever went. He never got to explore this startling new frontier because, inevitably, he was woken up out of his dream. "Come on, Snooze. Get your clothes on. Your oatmeal's getting cold." "What's going on, Dad? Where am I?" he would ask sleepily, disoriented. "You're in bed. Still, you're going to be late for school if you don't hurry. Time to get a move on." Fortunately, his father was willing to overlook a little oversleeping because Max was a hard worker and nearly straight a student once he shook off the drowsies and applied himself. For his part, Max was willing to overlook the fact that he disliked oatmeal, grinning and bearing each unpleasant bite, because he really loved his father, who was all he had and did the best he could, and dared not disappoint him on purpose over a trifle. Chapter 3. Max, whose sense of humor was every bit as dry as his father's, so dry that his classmates, misconstruing his jokes, chided him for being too serious, liked to describe himself as an only child of an only parent. He never knew his mother, though oddly enough, he felt he understood her, perhaps too well. Besides looking alike, with the same wavy hair and bony, almost Asian facial structure, they formed an oddball dynamic duo, the poster child and poster adult for weirdos everywhere. His mother had been a maverick anthropologist specializing in cryptozoology, a fancy word for the study of mysterious, officially unacknowledged creatures such as the Yeti, Chupacabra, and Loch Ness Monster. As a scientist studying animals other scientists held to be at best figments of the collective imagination, at worst hoaxes, Dr. Cynthia Holden Diver, despite winning a number of prestigious academic awards, including 2 Fulbrights, had known firsthand what it was to be an outcast, ridiculed, and marginalized by her peers. Never mind that, as a tireless explorer and field researcher, she had produced an impressive body of evidence for the existence of hominid cryptids, aka Bigfoot, including dozens of eyewitness accounts, enormous footprint casts the size of snowshoes, and fur samples with unknown DNA. The evidence never seemed to matter to those in power, who had already made up their minds and did what people typically do when their worldview is threatened by new data. They attacked the messenger. When he was 10 years old, Max gave in to curiosity about his mother by sneaking a peek at her personal effects, which his father kept in a scuffed Seward travel trunk beneath his bed. Inside he found her throwback, horn-rimmed reading glasses, a chestnut-colored suede satchel, binoculars, a gold and onyx hairpin patterned after an Egyptian scarab, a red alpaca wool scarf, a broken compass, knee-high safari boots worn to almost nothing at the heels, and a torn blue rain poncho that smelled of grease and mud. It was strange and unsettling to think that a whole life, his own mother's at that, could boil down to half-forgotten oddments molding away in the darkness of a hidden chest. The most intriguing item Max discovered was a leather-bound book, which turned out to be his mother's field journal, containing a veritable bestiary of pencil illustrations of strange creatures, in addition to many pages of notes of a complex scientific nature in her feverish handwriting. At first glance, the handwriting sent shivers down Max's spine. It looked virtually identical to his own hurried, barely legible script, which usually earned him SC for neatness, or lack thereof, on his report cards, his lowest grade by far. Max never intended to be messy with his writing, which he could read just fine, years later if necessary, even if his teachers couldn't. He merely found that his active mind tended to move too fast for his hand to keep up with. Obviously, his mother faced a similar dilemma. Inside the journal's front cover, as a kind of private epigraph and guiding philosophy, she had penned a quote from the renowned psychologist Carl Jung: "I shall not commit the fashionable stupidity of regarding everything I cannot explain as a fraud." Though Max loved and respected his father more than anyone else alive, in most ways he more closely identified with his mother. His father was the proverbial insider, a folk hero, a golden boy who could do no wrong, whereas mother and son were quintessential outsiders, quirky individuals with eccentric notions and substandard handwriting. Max wondered if she too, as a child, had trouble coloring inside the lines. He always visualized her as a slightly irreverent young woman, fresh out of Yale graduate school, as she appeared in the framed photograph that graced the mantelpiece of the Diver family, such as it was now, home on Tupelo Street. In the photo, over which Max sometimes caught his father in the melancholy act of reminiscing, his parents were captured arm in arm, smiling and in love, next to Captain Diver's red and blue Cessna Skyhawk parked on the sun-drenched tarmac of nearby Cape Carnival jetport. His mother looked like a cover girl with her olive tan, white teeth, hazelnut eyes, and lustrous auburn hair. Only her slightly raised nose gave away something a little left of center in her character, some inherent rebelliousness, a sassy gene that made her go her own way, even if it meant flying against the flock. 12 years her senior, his father was tall, robust, and in the prime of his life and career, with the barest hint of gray in the tips of his cropped brown hair. He looked like a statue of a Roman emperor, with his square chin and noble bearing. Fittingly, the Skyhawk was called the Tempus Fugit, Latin for time flies. According to Max's Aunt Nadine, whom he sometimes questioned whenever she babysat in matters regarding his mother, rather than burden his father with memories that could only depress him, the photo had been taken around the time of their engagement. The two had met barely 6 months earlier, while flying no less. When not hunting for Bigfoot, his mother was an avid amateur pilot who owned and flew her own rebuilt, as in by her, Cessna 150J, christened appropriately enough the Rara avis, Latin for strange bird. She had contacted his father via radio on sighting the Tempest Fugit off the southern coast of Florida one Sunday afternoon. They had exchanged words about a storm coming in from down around the Keys, and somehow, before their aerial chat ended, managed to make a date for dinner the next weekend. The rest was history. To say the two were made for each other would be an understatement. They seemed destined to meet and fated to live together happily ever after. Had they known what the future held in store, Max couldn't help but ask himself, would they still have chosen to marry and have a child? Chapter 4. Max was there when she died. He was the reason she died. He had to live with that. Her candle went out in childbirth. It seems like a cruel joke by the universe, but sometimes a child sees his first light at the exact instant his mother sees her last. It just happens sometimes, and unfortunately it happened to Max. As he learned years later, when he was old enough to understand such things, there had been complications. He was positioned in an abnormal way, imagine that. There was an emergency procedure to save him, his mother wouldn't stop bleeding, and she passed away right there in the hospital. In the blink of an eye, what was supposed to be a joyous occasion for all involved turned into a life-altering tragedy for all involved. Strangely, Max was born with the caul, which means there was a removable membrane like a rubbery bubble of skin attached to his newborn head. Throughout history, and with gut-wrenching irony in Max's case, children entering the world this way have been considered extremely lucky. In Roman and medieval times, such babies were thought to be very special indeed, even marked for greatness. There was a legend that anyone in possession of a caul could never drown, which made cauls highly valued by sailors. Others believed cauls could defend against sorcery and witchcraft. People would preserve and sell them, turning them into charms for protection. By the time Max was born, such superstitions had been replaced by another superstition. Having a caul signified one in possession of supernatural capabilities, such as ESP or the ability to heal with touch. True, Max was gifted, to borrow Dr. Morrow's word. And the nature of his gift did seem to be somewhat supernatural, at least in the sense of being above and beyond what is considered natural. This fact Max had proved to himself by the time he turned 12. His birthday was typically celebrated, if one could use this term for an occasion that elicited such ambivalence, not least in himself, in conjunction with New Year's Eve on December 31st, even though he was technically born on January 1st at the stroke of midnight. Throughout his 11th year, Max's dreams had taken on a more intense quality. The colors were brighter. The sounds were crisper. He could actually feel the wind in his hair and eyes as he flew right up until his father gently nudged him awake. Time to wake up, Snooze. Get dressed while I prepare the oatmeal. Then, right around the time Max noticed the beginnings of facial hair and pimples, when he had shot up 3 inches in as many months over the course of the fall, and his voice started to crack and deepen, otherwise known as adolescence, his dreams abruptly shifted from technicolor to, well, real. He would dream of flying through rain clouds and wake up wet from head to toe. This caused his father to assume, naturally enough, that his son had wet the bed. But he hadn't. He had never wet the bed, not even as a young child. Or dreaming, he would zoom through a thick jungle dodging sinuous vines and huge fronds, only to wake up with strange bits of plant matter stuck in his hair and what looked like grass stains on his pajamas. Could he be sleepwalking? Maybe. But that hardly explained some of his dreams, especially the ones he woke up from clutching bizarre, out-of-context objects from the dreamscapes he had just visited. Sasha Inchi seeds from Peru, a tattered prayer flag from Tibet, an obsidian arrowhead found behind the Pyramid of the Sun at Teotihuacan. He placed everything he retrieved from his dreams in an old Lego box he had found one day while waking in the attic. The box he hid behind the stack of sweaters in his closet. He wasn't willing to share these objects, given their strange provenance, with anyone just yet. In trying to make sense of his increasingly confounding sleep experiences, Max was forced to consider the possibility, admittedly troubling, that his dreams no longer stemmed from a virtual reality, but were actually taking place somehow. He had proof now, stashed in an old Lego box. Remembering the epigraph to his mother's field journal, "I shall not commit the fashionable stupidity of regarding everything I cannot explain as a fraud," he began to understand it a little better. It seemed to be addressing scientists, many of whom appeared to believe that anything real had to come with an explanation, as if nature somehow owed them that, or else it wasn't real. This scientific mentality appeared deeply flawed to Max, especially in light of his dreams, not to mention all the mysterious phenomena that obviously were quite real, if still barely fathomed. Visions, reincarnation, telepathy, telekinesis, levitation, spontaneous combustion, time travel, UFOs, ghosts, apparitions, poltergeists, Bigfoot. For personal reasons beyond simple curiosity, during the first half of 6th grade, when his dreams began to turn concrete, Max read every book in the library on such topics. All of these mysterious occurrences, and many more, had been documented and studied by thousands of people for hundreds of years, yet most modern scientists acted as if they couldn't sweep these phenomena under the rug fast enough. The alternative approach, of course, which his mother had obviously chosen, was to embrace, or at least strike a truce with life's mysteries. This required allowing yourself not to be able to explain something, temporarily anyway, and be okay with that, a tall order for big brains. The more time went along, and the more dreams of an apparently tangible nature Max experienced, the more questions he had. Not infrequently, he found himself wondering about his call. Aunt Nadine had shown it to him once. She had been there at his birth, and despite her grief at losing her younger sister, had thought to save and preserve her nephew's call, which remained in her keeping almost 2 decades. "Do you mind if I hold it?" he asked, examining the thin, translucent membrane, folded, dried, and shrunken with age, in his aunt's hand. "Not as long as you're very careful," she replied, placing the call gently in his palm. "Those things are as rare as hen's teeth." It was light, diaphanous, and almost weightless, like brittle plastic. In a sense, it was all that remained, physically, of his mother. "Time to give it back," said Aunt Nadine. "You've held it long enough. I'll put it in a safe place." "Why was I born with the call, Aunt Nadine?" "Because God made you that way." "But why did God make me this way?" "God moves in mysterious ways." Max had been assured his call had nothing to do with the complications that took his mother. At the very least, that was a relief. But did his call have anything to do with his being so complicatedly gifted? Chapter 5. In his mother's honor, vowing not to commit the fashionable stupidity of ignoring things he didn't understand, Max performed a brave act of nonconformity by accepting the possibility that his dreams might be exactly what they seemed, real. This got him in the first real trouble of his elementary education, and succeeded, finally, in making him a genuine pariah in the cruel survival of the fittest microcosm that was 6th grade. Max wasn't just an only child, he was also a lonely child. The other kids at school, from the beginning sensing he was different, even if they couldn't put their finger on just how, tended to retreat into their little cliques and keep him at arm's length. His coping mechanism was to seek solace in books, in whose company he learned a great many things but cultivated no friendships. Inevitably, he came to be thought of as something of a bookworm, an unflattering image which his glasses, acquired by prescription when his vision started blurring, certainly didn't help. Nor, for that matter, did his choice of weird reading material, lately books about the paranormal, supernatural, and unexplained, which his classmates judged as harshly as scientists with big egos and closed minds, dubbing him Mad Max behind his back. Only the fact that he was the son of a well-known astronaut, and thus indirectly famous, spared him, for a while, from utter social annihilation. Not surprisingly, Max felt he had no one to confide in about the unconventional quality of his dreams. Certainly not Aunt Nadine, who would think he was in league with the devil, and gossip that she was, blab the story to anyone willing to listen. Whenever he considered telling his father, he always stopped just short of doing so. Captain Diver was busier than usual flying solo missions in the Skyhawk, he described cryptically, when Max inquired as related to naval intelligence. Naval intelligence, said Max one morning over oatmeal. Isn't that an oxymoron? Ha ha. Believe me, I've heard that one a few times. So why are you flying so much, Dad? And if it's official business, why are you in the Tempest Fugit instead of a Navy plane? I'm afraid that's classified. All the good stuff is. To his enormous credit, Max's father never held his wife's death against his son. If anything, he seemed to love him more for having lost her, maybe because mother and son were so alike, and not just in physical appearance. Something on your mind, Max? Why do you ask? You tend to crack jokes when your thoughts are serious. Are you sleeping okay? Do I seem like I'm not? You look a little tired. There are circles under your eyes. You can see them through my glasses? I've got pretty good eyesight. Remember your father, the astronaut? But you're older now. I'm not older. Just better. This was the way the two typically communicated, through playful banter, skimming along with their words, both careful not to break the water's surface and enter deeper territory. For better or worse, Max resisted the urge to share his dreams with his father, the one person in his life who might have understood them, and instead, just before Thanksgiving break, made the mistake of confiding in Ms. Bridgewater, the school counselor. You think your dreams are what? She asked, sitting upright and alert in the chair across from his in her little office 2 doors down from the cafeteria, when he began to relate his odd experiences. Real, he answered with the tone of a question, suddenly unsure of himself. Trying to remain professional, Ms. Bridgewater patted her permed blonde hair and put on a strained lipstick smile. Max, honey, dreams are not real. None of them. Not a one. How do you know? I just do. Everybody does, she commented with the kind of nervous laugh people sometimes use in the presence of a slightly unhinged person. Zhuangzi didn't, said Max, plucking up his courage. Zhuang who? Zhuangzi. A Chinese philosopher. He's the guy who couldn't figure out whether he was a man dreaming of a butterfly or a butterfly dreaming of himself. Under no circumstances, Max, does an obscure philosopher's question prove the reality of dreams. People have had visions and dreams that came true, Ms. Bridgewater. Did you know that? People have seen things in dreams they couldn't have known about otherwise. Before responding, Ms. Bridgewater drew a deep breath. Max, I'm going to put this as plainly as possible. This dream thing is totally in your head. Just hear me out, Ms. Bridgewater. I've got proof. I find things in my dreams and bring them back. Things? Objects. Objects that don't belong in Florida. For a moment, she appeared on the verge of debating the point, only to decide at the last instant not to add fuel to the fire by encouraging him. That's impossible, Max. But I have to give you credit. You have a very lively imagination. This, she said with the obvious intent of ending the conversation and sending Max on his merry way. She turned back to her desk and straightened her cup of pens and holiday poinsettia with the tips of her painted fingernails. When Max didn't budge, she turned back and asked, Is there anything else you'd like to discuss today? This would have been the moment for Max to cut his losses, to grin, shrug, and treat the whole subject like a bit of make-believe that just got out of hand. That would have been the wise, the prudent thing to do. But Max had far too much of his mother's feisty nature for that. And nothing got under his skin like being talked down to by an adult who knew less about the topic of conversation than he did. In addition to the characteristics already mentioned, there were 2 other important aspects of Max's dreams, especially many of the ones he had been having for the past several months leading up to his 12th birthday. First, many of his recent dreams involved temporal displacement or time travel. Such dreams undeniably took place in the past or future, sometimes the distant past or future, other times closer to the present. And second, a lot of these dreams were even more striking than usual because they featured actual people Max knew and apparently real events from their lives, in the past or future. The previous night, clear as day, Max had dreamed of Ms. Bridgewater as a young girl of 10 or 11 with torn blue jeans and dirty bare feet. "You grew up in the mountains, Ms. Bridgewater, didn't you?" he said. "Why, yes, I did, Max. Near Johnson City, Tennessee. A long time ago. You lived on a tobacco farm. Back in the days when there were many small tobacco farms in the mountains. When lots of people still smoked cigarettes before it was proven that smoking causes cancer." "That's right," said a surprised Ms. Bridgewater in a thin, faraway voice. "I did. But not your father," continued Max. "Even though he farmed tobacco to make a living, he hated cigarettes because he suspected them of having caused your mother's lung cancer." "How do you know all of this?" "Your house was purplish, sort of U-shaped, surrounded by a tall boxwood hedge. Your mother died in the big bedroom overlooking the deck." "Max, have you been talking with my sister? Did she contact you for some reason? I can imagine how you must have felt when she was gone. I'm sure you didn't know what to do with your feelings. You lived beside the tobacco field, which was separated from the woods by a tiny creek. In the fall, you preferred hunting chinkapins to helping your father in the tobacco. How do you know about chinkapins? They don't tend to grow this far south. That was where he caught you smoking right after she passed away. Red-handed. In the woods where there were chinkapins. He tanned your hide that day. He grabbed a hickory switch and whipped you until you bled through the legs of your jeans. I never told anybody that story. Not even my sister. How did you know about my daddy whipping me, Max?" He could sense that his story had deeply upset Ms. Bridgewater, whose face was bright red from a mixture of anger, shame, and sorrow. Being brutally punished by her father for smoking after her mother's passing had driven a wedge in their relationship, one that had widened over the years, to the point that for nearly 2 decades the two hardly ever spoke before he, too, was gone. Max was unaware of these subsequent details. But intuiting that he had accidentally poured salt on a still open wound, he felt genuinely sorry to have revealed the contents of his dream in such a sudden and unexpected fashion. Realizing with a start that Ms. Bridgewater was in tears, her head bobbing in her hands, he stood up and approached her hunched form. He was in the process of touching her jerking shoulder and apologizing when she looked at him with bloodshot eyes and said, "Go back to class. I'll need a note." "Here it is," she said, scrawling it out and handing it to him. "Thanks. I'm sorry, Ms. Bridgewater. Go now, please." Max exited the office, closing the door gently behind him, and stood in the echoing hallway for a moment with his note and a heavy heart. Under no circumstances had he meant to cause Ms. Bridgewater any more pain, he just wanted her to believe him. Before returning to geography, he reached in his pocket and fished out a handful of miniature chestnuts, known as chinkapins, he had thought to use as evidence, and dropped them in a trash can. Chapter 6. In the aftermath of Max's encounter with Ms. Bridgewater, Thanksgiving had been the calm before the storm. He spent it with his father, who had most of the long holiday weekend off from classified missions in the Tempus Fugit and was in excellent spirits. "Be sure you don't eat too much turkey, Snooze," he had joked while carving the enormous sizzling bird. "All that tryptophan might make you sleep forever." "You know what tryptophan is?" "You mean the amino acid released by protein during digestion that helps produce serotonin and makes you sleepy?" "God, you're so much like her," his father said as if to himself, with a smile that somehow managed to be both proud and wistful. "That's a big bird for just 2 people. I think we can handle it." Max and his father had flown kites on the unseasonably cool beach in the afternoons, treating themselves to hot chocolate at their favorite little stand on the boardwalk, before returning to evenings of leftover turkey sandwiches, which did make Max gloriously drowsy, and old reruns of Star Trek. "You remind me of Captain Kirk," he remarked to his father, suppressing a yawn. "Seriously?" "Seriously. Well, now that you mention it, you remind me of Dr. Spock." "Seriously?" "Seriously." Max made the Vulcan symbol of blessing by parting the second and third fingers of his left hand. "Live long and prosper. And boldly go where nobody has gone before." For 3 nights running, Max hung on as long as he could, snuggled against his father's side, smelling Old Spice on the couch in front of the TV, before the sleep of a blessed day took him, and he was carried like a sack of beans down the hallway and tucked in bed. But on Sunday, the air started going out of Max's emotional balloon when Captain Diver had to fly another mission, and just after he left, Aunt Nadine landed in their home with a thud to babysit. "I've asked your father I don't know how many times to get a desk job," she said, bustling in the door with her suitcase by way of hello. "Why?" asked Max, dispensing with formalities himself. "He would hate it. For starters, he's no spring chicken. And you're only getting older." "What's that supposed to mean?" "A young man your age needs a strong masculine presence in his life, Max." He had followed her into the guest bedroom, where she plopped her suitcase on the bed and glanced several times around the room to get her bearings. She had a way, half annoying, half comical, of looking out of place wherever she was. "But under the circumstances," she continued, removing her jacket and hanging it neatly in the closet, "I think he's probably done the best he could. Lord knows being an only parent is no cakewalk. That said, I don't know what he's doing down there halfway to South America in that puddle jumper. I can tell you one thing, he's not delivering the mail." Max had spent enough time around Aunt Nadine to realize she often spoke around what she really meant to say, and he had developed a fairly keen ability to read between her lines. In this case, she was trying to communicate that since Max had already lost his mother, it was irresponsible of his father to risk his neck on a regular basis, when he could snap his fingers and take an administrative job with NASA that would be a lot closer and safer. Max spent a subdued, depressed evening with his aunt, who read her Bible and wouldn't let him watch Star Trek, and then all heck broke loose Monday morning when school resumed. He had a sinking feeling in his gut, a premonition of something bad about to happen, as he walked, backpack heavy with books, under the swaying palm trees the 6 blocks, 4 down the beach and 2 back from it, to John F. Kennedy Elementary School. On entering the grounds, his intuitive sense of a storm on the horizon grew stronger. People seemed to be giving him funnier than usual looks. "Hey everybody, it's Woo Woo Maxwell." Doug Biggins, JFK's best athlete and resident bully, greeted him in the crowded hallway near the lockers, to a round of conspiratorial snickering from those listening. "Got any visions for us today, Woo Woo?" Woo Woo was a new nickname. Max was wondering where it came from and what exactly it meant, when he was sternly tapped on the shoulder and turned to find Mr. Priestley, the principal, scowling above him. "Max, I need to see you in my office. Right now." Right now. Gossip travels fast in any school. Bad news, in particular, has a way of exceeding the speed of light, so that everybody seems to know everything before anyone has uttered anything. Exactly how the whole student body knew about Max's meeting with Ms. Bridgewater would remain a mystery. He suspected word had traveled via the teacher's lounge to select students' ears, and thence along a whispering grapevine, until it was common knowledge he had freaked out the school counselor with his spooky talk. Ms. Bridgewater, suggesting that Max suffered from a severe mental disorder, possibly schizophrenia, and might be in need of medication, had reported the incident to Mr. Priestley, who was concerned enough to take immediate action. "You understand, Max," he told the bewildered 11-year-old seated in his office, peering at the boy over his spectacles, "I'm just trying to do the right thing here." "But Mr. Priestley, I didn't do anything wrong." "You acted very strange, Max, and frightened Ms. Bridgewater." "I didn't mean to. It just happened. I'm sorry." "How long have you been having these dreams?" "All my life. Well, ever since I can remember." "And you think they might actually be real?" Max knew it was absolutely the wrong thing to say, even though it was the truth as soon as he spoke the word yes. Mr. Priestley's pale moon of a face seemed a bit shaken by Max's frank response. "It doesn't strike you as odd that you can't tell the difference between reality and dreams?" "But I can tell the difference. This is reality right now." Mr. Priestley appeared to consider this new information for a moment. "Is there any history of mental problems in your family, Max?" "None that I know of." "I'm going to have to contact your father." "I was afraid you'd say that." It has to be done. He's on a mission right now. A mission? Navy stuff. When will he be back? Tomorrow. Okay. I'll be in touch tomorrow. You can go now. Max stood and was halfway out the door when Mr. Priestley called after him. Max? Yes, Mr. Priestley? Try to be normal. Chapter 7. Why so pale and wan? A voice with an exaggerated British accent inquired as Max slumped against the school wall at recess. Nearly all the other boys were engaged in games of physical skill, mostly basketball and soccer, which never much interested Max. Squinting in the slanted sunlight of early December, he looked up at twin reflections of himself in Monday's saucer-sized glasses. In both distorted images, he stood out as puny and unathletic, pathetic and defeated, with his own fairly large glasses like bug eyes and woolly hair ruining any chance of ever being able to consider himself attractive. Why so pale and what? He asked. One, answered Tuesday in her normal accent, grinning from ear to ear with big teeth in a natural manner that struck Max as unnervingly genuine. It's poetry. It means lifeless. You got that right. Monday was the smartest student at JFK, and it wasn't even close. Especially in language arts, the teachers were unanimous in thinking she was some kind of prodigy. She knew the answers even to the trick questions, usually before they were asked. She had paid the price for her precociousness by being ostracized as the resident nerd ever since she showed up and enrolled, fresh in from somewhere far away, like Oklahoma in 4th grade. Max had never actually had a conversation with her. He wasn't sure why, but he suspected himself of having judged her, like the others, simply for being different. Now that the shoe was on the other foot and he was being judged, he felt a tinge of hypocrisy, which produced a hint of shame that reddened his cheeks. Against a backdrop of kids running helter-skelter and making noise, Tuesday was still grinning quietly above Max in patched corduroys and Birkenstocks, staring down at him with enormous gray eyes framed by her own curly hair, sort of a yellow ochre, snailing down the sides of her plump, lively face. You feel like sitting down? Asked Max, politely if a little awkwardly, indicating the sidewalk beside him. Sure, she replied, plopping down in yoga position, legs crossed and back straight, not even touching the wall. So, do you really have dreams that come true? Is that what you wanted to know? It's one thing I wanted to know. Is that what they're all saying? Not all. Some of them. I bet it's not all they're saying. No. It's not. Something in her relaxed tone and body language, which seemed utterly devoid of anything resembling a hidden agenda, made Max feel comfortable opening up, at least a little. Technically, my dreams don't usually come true. What's so special about them? They're real. You mean lucid dreaming? Where you figure out, while dreaming, that you're in a dream. How do you know about lucid dreaming? My mother's an old hippie. We've got all kinds of reading material that's off the beaten path, if you get my drift. I get it. Look, Tuesday, I don't mind talking about this stuff with you. To be honest, it's kind of a relief. But you've got to promise you won't say anything to anyone. I promise. Cross my heart. Good. Where were we? Lucid dreaming. Right. Well, as far as I can tell, based on my research. That's a funny thing for a kid to say, isn't it? You mean the based on my research part? Yeah. Kind of geeky? Yeah. I'm cool with it. Great. Anyway, as I was saying, lucid dreaming is when you simply become aware of the dream, right? Sometimes this happens naturally with people, but there are also techniques you can use to cultivate the ability. Like remembering to look at your hands in your dream? That's what Carlos Castaneda's teacher, Don Juan, instructs him to do. Who's Carlos Castaneda? A psychedelic writer. My mom has his books. I don't know. I never tried looking at my hands. I guess I just did it naturally. I tried it. And didn't work. The thing is, Tuesday, why on earth were you named Tuesday? Care to venture a guess? You were born on a Tuesday. Bingo Ringo. And your last name really is Monday? Kind of wild, huh? Actually, I sort of like your name. It has a nice ring. Thanks. I like it too. Care for an Altoid? They're curiously strong. Max had seen but never tried Altoids. Thanks, he said, accepting a little white mint from the red tin and popping it in his mouth. Sure enough, it was curiously strong, just like the label said. If you think about it, Max, we've got more in common than not having any friends. What else have we got in common? We both have only parents. I know about what happened to your mom. I mean, your father's a celebrity. There's a biography and everything. You actually read it? Yeah. You? No. I figured I already knew most of it. Where's your old man? Long gone. Dead? Not that I'm aware of. I never knew who he was. I don't think my mother did either, if you get my meaning. Something to do with the hippie thing? Exactly. She used to live in a commune in New Mexico. She's changed a lot over the years, though. We get along pretty well. I get along with my only parent, too. He seems like a good man. His biographer spoke highly of him. Let's just hope he keeps his cool tomorrow. He's not going to be a happy camper. Parent-teacher conference? Worse. Parent-principal conference. Do you think I'm crazy, Tuesday? Crazy? As in schizophrenic? You heard. Everybody did. Of course. Ms. Bridgewater really has it out for me, doesn't she? Seems that way. What did you do to her? I didn't do anything. I just saw some stuff from her past that upset her. In a dream? Yeah. Let me get this straight, Max. You're not just lucid dreaming, you're also seeing visions in your dreams? If that's what you want to call them. Wow. That's super cool. You really think so? Definitely. Absolutely. I'd love to see visions like that. Who wouldn't? Everybody except you. What did you see concerning Ms. Bridgewater? It's not important. There's more, Tuesday. More? About my dreams. I bring stuff back. Stuff. Things that don't belong here in Florida. Objects totally out of context. I have a box full of bizarre items hidden in my closet. Like what? A Venetian carnival mask. Some kind of antique Celtic bracelet. A tiny ceremonial statue from Easter Island. For real? For real. Far out. This is way more than just lucid dreaming, Max. That's what I've been trying to tell you. So what's the verdict? You think I'm crazy? Actually, not at all. I'll side with Emily Dickinson. Emily Dickinson? Come on, Max. We just studied her. Much madness is divinest sense. To a discerning eye. Much sense the starkest madness. 'Tis the majority. In this as all prevail. Assent and you are sane. Demur, you're straightway dangerous. And handled with a chain. Max reflected for a moment. So if I understand, a lot of so-called insane people are perfectly sane? It's the way things are. And the crazy people actually run everything? Exactly. From inside the school building, the bell suddenly rang loud and shrill, signaling the end of recess. Over the course of his talk with Tuesday, possibly the best conversation of his young life, Max had completely forgotten he was at school. I really enjoyed chatting, he said. Me too. I like to chat. We should do this more often. Then let's do it. They stood up and started inside to algebra. And Tuesday. Yeah, Max? How about we be each other's friend? Deal. Chapter 8. Max examined his hands with their long, graceful fingers waving like pale seagrasses in front of his face from under the covers, and though he was still in bed, instantly knew he was dreaming. Breathing from the bottom of his diaphragm, like yogis are taught to do, and pushing down with his mind, he floated up and hovered, weightless, staring beneath him at his own sleeping form with its bushy eyebrows, incipient whiskers, and two unsightly pimples at the base of the elongated chin. Otherwise, in sleep, his face was perfectly smooth and relaxed. Besides the slight undulation of his breath, only his eyes were moving, jitterbugging manically under malleable lids. In one of many epiphanies, small and large, he had experienced over the course of his dreams, Max realized those eyes were watching him even as he was staring at them. With this thought, he glanced at the window, outside whose curtains the first barest hint of daylight was beginning to drain the pitch out of the sky. Knowing his father would wake him soon, he made the most of what was left of the night, zipping out into the cool December air in his pajamas and heading south toward Cuba. As he approached the Keys, little subtropical islands dotting the Straits of Florida like emeralds he had flown over numerous times in real life, dawn was streaking the sky with yellow rays. His cheeks could feel the warmth of the sun surging up against the vast Atlantic horizon. At that very instant, his peripheral vision registered a small craft, tailed by an even smaller one on course, to intersect his line of flight in the eastern distance. Speeding up while adjusting his flight pattern, he approached the two aircraft at a sharper angle, realizing after a few seconds, with a jolt, that the lead plane was the Tempest Fugit piloted by his father. The red and blue striped Cessna Skyhawk was veering farther and farther east, in an attempt to outrun a nasty squall preceding a nastier storm, resembling a dark octopus with spinning tentacles of clouds blowing up from down around Puerto Rico. Max found himself fighting the wind as well, and instinctively fell in behind the Tempest Fugit, taking advantage of the draft like a race car driver to lessen his wind drag. In the same motion, he became aware once again of the other aerial object tailing the Skyhawk, which was now roughly parallel to him at a distance of maybe 200 yards. Imagine his astonishment when he grasped that it was no aircraft, but another person sailing through the wispy clouds beside him. On seeing this most bizarre sight, the first thing he thought of was a story he had once read about Padre Pio, a devout Catholic priest who bore the stigmata or Christ's wounds and was reportedly able to bilocate or be in two different places at the same time. Padre Pio, who later became a saint, was cited by multiple eyewitnesses flying alongside Allied fighter jets during World War II, when he successfully kept the pilots from bombing a beautiful church that was no longer occupied by Axis forces. The figure flying alongside him in his dream was still too far away for Max to discern his, or her, features. But it was obviously an adult human flying headlong, arms outstretched, at high velocity against the wind just like him. The storm was gaining quickly. As a group like a phalanx of birds, the three flyers adjusted their trajectory northeast toward the island of Bermuda in a last-ditch attempt to escape the fast-approaching spinning darkness. Coming within 100 yards of the other airborne person, Max made out that it was a young man, and as he got even closer, unless his eyes were playing tricks on him, he found himself staring at himself. Well, himself at 18 or thereabouts. Even under emergency weather conditions, Max was relieved to see that he turned out well, actually handsome, with a male version of his mother's attractive face, no glasses, and a decent physique under faded jeans and a gray-maroon university sweatshirt. So that must be where I end up going to college, he thought. The older Max took no notice of his younger avatar, remaining singularly focused on the Tempest Fugit, which seemed to have lost its sense of direction and was now sailing directly into the storm's swirling vortex. Max, the young boy, felt that he had to do something, but he didn't know what. He zoomed up and over the Skyhawk until he was peering down into the cockpit, where his father was adjusting instruments and repeating himself into his radio, which appeared to have gone dead. Max shouted and banged on the cockpit with his fists, but his father couldn't hear him. As they neared the outer edge of the vortex, their speed steadily increased, until there was a thunderous boom indicating they had broken the sound barrier. The stormy light began to flicker in searing multicolored strobes as the wind buffeted the three flyers left and right. The light looked like electricity riding cyclonic currents. Max could feel it, brisk and tingling, like peppermint on his skin. Instinctively, agonizingly, he was forced to let go of the Cessna and allow it to careen forward at exponentially increasing speeds into the center of the vortex, spinning in a 360 as it went, with the older Max hot on its tail. There was a nearly blinding flash, like a small atomic bomb detonating, and the Tempest Fugit disappeared into the impossible brightness like a stone dropped into a raging wildfire from above. The older Max, with an alarmed but determined look on his face, hesitated briefly, before shooting forward, following Captain Diver into the empty center of the vortex and likewise vanishing with a flash from sight. Chapter 9. Wake up, Snooze. Come on, buddy. It's just a bad dream. Max sat bolt upright in bed, shaking and gasping, only to find his father seated beside him with a concerned look on his chiseled face that sported a 2-day growth of salt and pepper beard. Dad? It's me, Max. I'm right here. Oh, Dad. Overcome with emotion, Max grabbed his father's neck like a 3-year-old and tried unsuccessfully to hold back the tears. I thought I'd lost you. It's okay. I haven't gone anywhere. Slowly, Max composed himself, noting as his eyes dried that the room seemed brighter than usual. What time is it? He wondered aloud. A little after 10. 10? As in o'clock. I got a phone call from Mr. Priestley early this morning right after I got back. From your classified mission? Yes. Look, we don't have to talk about this right now. Do you feel okay? You were squirming pretty hard there with some kind of nightmare. Max felt his chest drenched with sweat inside his damp pajama top. Yeah, I'm okay. I'm fine. Really? Why did you let me sleep in? There was no sense in waking you earlier. I'm going to take you to school with me after I get cleaned up. So that you can look good for your parent-principal meeting? At least smell good. Never had Max appreciated his father's quick wit more than just then. I suppose you're wondering what's going on with your son. That's putting it lightly. Care to enlighten me, Max? I didn't lie to Ms. Bridgewater, if that means anything. It does mean something. Go on. When Max didn't continue, his father tried to reassure him. Look. You're my child. We'll get through this. If this is some kind of mental problem, I'll do everything in my power to help. It's not some kind of mental problem. The only people who have mental problems, it seems, are Ms. Bridgewater and Mr. Priestley. Captain Diver actually laughed out loud. I've definitely felt that way about my superiors before. I just didn't have the guts to say it. Another silence ensued. Tell me, Max, what's this about your dreams? You think they might actually be happening? This question, like ice water splashed in his face, immediately called to mind the terrifying dream Max had just lived through, and he burst into tears again. Did I say something wrong? No, Dad. You never say anything wrong. His father laughed again. Well, that's good news. I was beginning to feel like I'd been born with my foot in my mouth. You seriously want to know about my dreams? I think I need to know about them. Okay. You asked for it. They're real. That's what they are. Your dreams are real? Yes. All right. I'm going to do what your mother always urged me to do, and suspend disbelief for the moment. Just for the sake of discussion, how exactly are your dreams real? With the exception of his most recent dream, which he kept to himself, Max proceeded to relate the progression of his dreaming career. How his dreams began, how they intensified, how they started to cross the line into the waking world, and how lately they had centered on actual people and scenarios. He had simply dreamed of a painful episode from Ms. Bridgewater's girlhood, he explained, and made the mistake of sharing it with her out of the blue, when she wouldn't believe that his dreams weren't just dreams. I can see how something like that would upset a person, admitted his father. Me too. Now. I said I was sorry. I'd take it back if I could. You realize, Max, all of this sounds a bit far-fetched? People used to believe the Earth was flat. They considered the idea of a round Earth far-fetched. Yes, I know. I've got proof, said Max, getting out of bed and fishing the Lego box out from behind the sweaters in his closet. Once again, his father attempted to keep the conversation as light as possible. Look, he quipped, I like Legos as much as the next guy. But I hardly consider them proof of anything. Ha ha. What am I looking at? Asked Captain Diver, staring at the brown Sasha Inchi seeds about the size of marbles his son had placed on his outstretched palm. Incan peanuts. Incan peanuts. From Peru. And this, said Max, showing him the wooden carving resembling a skeletal alien with a goatee, is a Kava Kava Moai statue. From Easter Island. Easter Island? It's ceremonial. Where did you get these things? Exactly. Here's a Tibetan prayer flag. This is a carnival mask from Venice. This obsidian arrowhead was found near the Pyramid of the Sun. Wait a second. Are you trying to tell me you brought this whole box of things back from your dreams? Not all at once. His father sat still and quiet for a long while, maybe 30 seconds, digesting this new information. Nobody gave you these things? He asked finally. Nope. And you didn't steal them? I was going to say buy them. I don't believe you'd steal anything. Think about it, Dad. My allowance wouldn't even cover the shipping. His father smiled and said, touché. So do you believe I'm crazy? I don't know what to believe. You think I'm lying? No. I definitely don't think you're lying. What are you going to do? Well, first I'm going to have a chat with Mr. Priestley. He's going to tell you I'm crazy. Probably. Then what? I'm going to speak with Dr. Morrow. Great. He'll probably put me on some kind of ADD medication that will make me truly delusional. I'm not so sure about that, Max. Let's just say Dr. Morrow's area of expertise is aligned with the sort of thing you describe. Aligned? That's all I can say about it. More classified business? I'm afraid so. Wonderful. Sorry. I wish I could tell you more. Me too. So, are you ready to get on with our day and put the unpleasant part behind us, Max? Ready as I'll ever be. Good. Hang in there. I'll grab a quick shower and make us some oatmeal. I'm starving. Chapter 10. That Friday, the last day before Christmas break, in celebration of the holidays, there were no afternoon classes, and everybody was enjoying a glorified post-lunch recess until school let out at 3. Max, who had endured the dreaded parent-principal conference, which led nowhere and decided nothing, earlier in the week, was still waiting for his father to have a chat with Dr. Morrow and deliver his verdict on his son's mental condition. In the meantime, Max and Tuesday were seated at their usual sidewalk spot discussing subjects well beyond the general purview of 6th grade. Want an orange? She asked. I've got one in my bag we could split. No thanks. I'm not hungry. So tell me again exactly what you saw in your dream, she said, excitedly popping an Altoid in her mouth and offering the tin to Max. It was some kind of vortex, he said, accepting a peppermint absent-mindedly while attempting to articulate the intense imagery of his recent dream in which his father, and apparently an older version of himself, disappeared into the eye of a hurricane. It was like a gigantic whirlwind. Some kind of portal. You mean like a dimensional doorway, a stargate? Yeah. Like a wormhole leading somewhere else. Groovy. I guess. It was actually kind of terrifying. You know, Tuesday, I never realized you had a tattoo. Her grass-stained corduroys had slid up her calf to reveal a small, beautifully intricate mermaid with hair like twisted Celtic knots and ornate scales like ancient armor just above the inside of her ankle. My mom gave it to me. Because of my middle name. Which is Serena. As in siren. You mean like a police siren? No, dummy. Like the mermaids who trapped Odysseus. The Greek sailor? One and the same. Your mom gave you that? She's an ink artist. Among other things. It's really good. I mean, if you like that sort of thing. You don't like it? That's not what I meant. I really do like it. I just had never thought about tattoos much. We come from different worlds, don't we? In some ways. So, what did you look like? Come again. At 18. In your dream. Oh. I was wearing an old gray sweatshirt with Maroon University in maroon letters on it. Seriously? That's an Ivy League school. And it's at the top of my list of colleges. They let you design your own curriculum. That would suit you well. It would suit you well too. Maybe. Hey woo-woo. Get up off your butt and come play some hoops with the boys. Or would you rather just sit there like a sissy? The protective bubble created by Max and Tuesday's conversation burst as Doug Biggins walked right through it into their shared airspace. Don't you want to play, woo? We need another sacrificial lamb for the opposing team. Despite his brawn, athletic prowess, and perfectly groomed blonde hair, Doug was far from stupid. For a bully, he had a surprisingly big vocabulary, and was an expert at getting under one's skin. I think I'll pass, said Max. Pass what? Gas? That's called flatulence, said Doug. Piss off, Doug, said Tuesday. Or you'll do what, little Miss Four Eyes? Hit me with a sonnet? Leave her out of this, said Max. Or you'll do what? I'd love to see what woo-woo Maxwell could do to me. Here was yet another occasion, eerily similar to his disastrous interview with Ms. Bridgewater, when Max clearly grasped, in no uncertain terms, the polarized choice being presented to him. Either he could kowtow to Doug's superior strength and say nothing, which might save his hide while merely damaging his pride, or he could throw caution to the winds and stand up for himself and his friend, the devil be damned. Hold my glasses, he told Tuesday, removing them and handing them to her. Put aside this masculine ego crap, Max. It's not worth it. He's going to cream you. Masculine ego? Obviously, you never knew my mother. Sensing a fight brewing, a crowd of children, distorted and out of focus owing to Max's myopia, had stopped playing and gathered like murmuring vultures along the sidewalk. Doug stood nearly 6 feet tall and once had actually dunked a basketball, which made him a living legend at JFK, where he ruled the playground with a heart of stone and an iron fist. Get him, Doug, someone yelled. Max went down on the grass like an autumn leaf with one punch, which he hardly saw coming, to the left eye and bridge of the nose, at which point the crowd erupted in guttural urgings like drunken bettors at a prize fight. Is that all you've got, woo? Said Doug, towering over him. I've seen punching bags offer more resistance. He kicked his fallen opponent's ribs with the toe of his sneaker. Get your puny ass up and fight me. With his good, so to speak, eye, Max watched dazedly as an orange struck Doug, though not hard enough to faze him, on the side of the head just above the ear. Get away from him, yelled Tuesday, who must have thrown the orange. I'll deal with you later, Four Eyes, Doug snarled at her. Max had never been in physical combat before. After the initial shock of being punched and kicked, like diving into Arctic water, everything went sort of numb. In fact, he temporarily passed out. During his unconscious state, it dawned on him that the primal ferric taste on his tongue was blood. In his mind's eye, he touched his left nostril and saw the glistening red on his fingertips. There it was, his own blood pressed right out of his membranes. Perhaps it was the blood or the shock of seeing it that pushed Max's sleeping self over the edge. Somehow he found himself standing again. He had the distinct impression he was sleepwalking. Sensing another drubbing, the crowd went wild with hooting and hollering. As Doug approached like a heavyweight intent on delivering a knockout, the world suddenly slowed down. With crystal clear vision, Max found himself watching everything in super slow motion, as he sometimes did, accidentally as it were, in his nighttime dreams. During the time it took Doug to rear back and propel his fist forward, Max was able to compose himself. He didn't technically move except to breathe deeply with his diaphragm, as the same vaguely luminous body he sometimes moved about in while dreaming seemed to step out of his skin and deflect Doug's blow with a forearm. The alarmed look on the bully's face was priceless. Max's dream body, a term he would learn years later, proceeded to strike him at lightning speed multiple times like a black belt. Under the chin, in the collarbone, across the back of the head, in the ribcage, in the abdomen. Doug went down on both knees, wheezing with the wind knocked out of him, and defeated for the first time in his life. Max's dream body stepped back into his own astonished skin and mysteriously disappeared from his sight, which straightaway reverted to blurry as he became wide awake. Just like that, the fight was over. Apparently, nobody except Max had seen anything. Rather, they had watched as Doug tossed backward and forward like a rag doll, then doubled over and collapsed to the ground. Doug's actions were so bizarre and exaggerated, many of those assembled thought he was goofing around and merely pantomiming a fight, especially since Max was just standing there playing the spectator with the rest of them. "You really are a freak." Doug, obviously in pain, managed to gasp. It took a minute for the reality of the situation to sink in on a collective level. Then, somebody went in search of Mr. Lipton, the science teacher, who was supposedly supervising the playground. "You okay, Max?" asked Tuesday, staunching his bleeding nose with tissues from her backpack. "I'll be fine." "You look terrible." "It's nothing." "Really?" "Here. Put these on," she said, sliding Max's glasses onto his sore face. "Ouch. Sorry." "It's okay." "That was incredible, Max." "What was incredible?" "You know what was incredible." "You mean you saw that?" "I don't know what I saw. I saw something, that's all I know. And it was pretty incredible." "What are you doing?" "Getting you the heck away from these savages." Tuesday had scooped up Max's backpack with her own and grabbed him by the arm and was resolutely leading him away from the school grounds. "But school isn't out yet, Tuesday." "It's out for us." "Where are you taking me?" "Home. I think it's time you met my mom." Chapter 11. Max and Tuesday waited for the adrenaline rush of the fight with Doug to subside, perhaps 10 minutes spent walking away from the beach toward downtown, before speaking again. "You sure you're okay, Max?" she asked finally. "It looks like you're starting to get a shiner." "Seriously? I've never had a black eye before." "You remind me of one of those dogs with only one white eye." "Thanks. That makes me feel a lot better." "I think your nose has stopped bleeding, though." "Count your blessings." "That's what I always say." "You realize there will be repercussions for skipping out like we just did?" "What's the worst they can do, Tuesday? Suspend us?" "Personally, I could use a break from that animal farm." A literary reference. "I didn't know you had it in you, Max." Despite himself, Max tried to laugh, which nearly doubled him over with pain in his ribcage. Instead of laughing, he wheezed like a smoker. Tuesday stopped grinning and said, "He kicked the crap out of your ribs." "He sure did. I hope they're just badly bruised and not broken." "You think you can make it?" "How much farther?" 7 more blocks." "I'll give it my best shot." "Here, let me carry my own backpack." "No way." That was just as well, since he probably couldn't have managed. After another couple blocks in the direction of downtown, Tuesday commented, as if speaking out loud what they were both thinking, "Doug Biggins. What a dingleberry." "My sentiments precisely. He's the one who's going to get in real trouble, you know." "You think?" "Absolutely. You didn't do anything." "We both know I did something, Tuesday." "That's true. But nobody else does." "What did you do?" "Heck if I know. It just happened. Things just happen with me." "I'm starting to understand that." "What did you see?" "I'm not sure, Max. It was as if your spirit stepped out of you and took out Doug." "That's what I saw too." "Has that ever happened before?" "Nope." "Did you mean for it to happen?" "No." "Well, maybe a little. I don't know, Tuesday. Maybe I am a freak." "Stop bad-mouthing my friend or I'll find another orange to throw." "That was a great shot. You hit him square in the head." "I know. Could you believe it? I've never thrown anything at anyone in my life. The two children had entered what Max's Aunt Nadine would have called a sketchy part of town, with somewhat run-down houses lining the streets, and generally less green and more litter than was to be found in his upscale suburban neighborhood. Max felt a ripple of anxiety as a tall black man wearing a green hood, low-riding jeans, and untied Nikes approached on the sidewalk. "Yo, Tuesday, how's it?" he said. "Gordon," she exclaimed. "Where have you been?" "Nolans," he said, which after a couple of seconds Max decrypted to mean New Orleans. "Let me see that last tattoo Mom gave you. Do you mind? I never got to look at it dry." Gordon, who looked about 30, smiled a congenial smile bright with silver and gold teeth as he pulled up his sleeve to reveal an impressive tattoo of a raven in flight with the sun in its beak. "That's some fine work," he said. "Your old lady's got talent. And she's fine too. You tell her what I said." "I will." "It really is gorgeous," said Tuesday, who explained to Max. "The design is based on an Athabascan legend of the raven who gave light to the world." "Athabascan?" "Native Alaskan." "Who's your friend, Tuesday? He looks kinda rough." "I'm sorry." "Gordon, this is Max. Max Gordon." "Nice to meet you," said Max. "Same here. You all right? I hope the other dude looks worse. Or did Mistress Tuesday open a can on you from jealousy?" "Oh, stop it," laughed Tuesday. "We're only friends. Let's just say the other fellow won't be picking on Max anymore." "Good. That's what I like to hear. Y'all take care now." "You too, Gordon," said Tuesday. Max had a sense, not unlike that of his dreams, of entering a parallel universe related to, yet distinctly different from his everyday world. The uncanny sensation of slipping into an alternate reality grew stronger as they covered the final 3 blocks to Tuesday's house, which from the outside looked more like a haunted house than a place where normal people lived. Well, maybe not normal. A rambling 3-story white Victorian with mahogany accents, the Monday home struck Max as more of a magic gingerbread house in a primeval forest than a real residence on a contemporary street corner. Yet despite its 2 medieval turrets and 3 bay windows seeming to lean out and peer down over them like bulbous eyes, the overall feeling the old relic of a place gave Max was one of exhilaration rather than apprehension. "We're here," announced Tuesday. "You actually live here? I take it it's a little different from your place?" "That's putting it mildly." Tuesday's hair bounced as she skipped up the uneven wooden steps onto the slanted porch that was home to a small forest of potted plants, many of which struck Max, who had never seen most of them before, as exotic. Experiencing an unexpected energy surge, he climbed the steps and followed Tuesday in the front doorway, where they were immediately met by a huge black tomcat with exceedingly long whiskers. Tuesday set the 2 backpacks on a nearby beanbag and scooped up the tomcat, scratching him behind the ears, which, judging by his loud purring, he enjoyed tremendously. "Max, this is Merlin." "Hello, Merlin." "Take him. He won't hurt you." Max, who had never had a pet of any kind, could only think to say, "Are you sure?" before Merlin was in his arms staring up at him impatiently. "Scratch him behind the ears." Max started scratching, and Merlin started purring. "I can tell he likes you," said Tuesday. "Tell him I like him too." "There's no need. He understands English perfectly well." If the vortex from Max's dream had seemed like a different world, the inside of the Monday home was a different world. But he had very little time to take it all in, other than to note a particular smell like that of old books mixed with boiling herbs and fresh paint, before he was greeted by the owner of the house. With waves of scarlet hair framing her Botticelli face, and a multicolored scrollwork of tattoos, too complicated to process decorating both graceful arms to the wrists, she emerged like a sunlit ruby from behind an Arab-looking curtain on the other side of a shelf stacked with antique tomes. "Max, this is my mom," said Tuesday. "Mom, this is Max. You remember, my friend from school. He needs your help." "It's a pleasure to meet you, Ms. Monday," said Max, almost too flabbergasted by everything but especially Ms. Monday to speak. "Good gracious," she said, foregoing formalities and ignoring for the moment Max's injuries, as she stared intently at him with Tuesday's same incisive gray eyes. Your aura is huge. My aura, Max managed to respond. The subtle energy field around your body, said Ms. Monday. It's absolutely enormous, and almost blindingly bright. I've never seen anything to compare. Mom, said Tuesday reprovingly. Can we get to his aura in a little while, like after we tend to his wounds? Right you are. How on earth did this happen? He looks awful. He got in a fight at school. Well, judging by the look of things, he didn't win. Yes, in fact he did. That's part of why he needs your help. With any other people and in any other situation, Max would have been irritated at being discussed in the third person to his face like a toddler. But for one reason or another, it didn't bother him, coming from these two kind people in that one-of-a-kind house. And then, just as he was able to identify the odd sensation of gratitude in his heart for having someone besides his father sincerely care for him, he blanked out cold from shock and exhaustion on the hardwood floor. Chapter 12. Max awoke from a mercifully dreamless state, only to find himself unable to see, at which point he realized something cool and clammy was covering his eyes. He reached up and discovered what felt like some kind of giant leaf draped across his face. When he removed it, sure enough, it turned out to be a wilted white cabbage leaf, slightly damp from water and smelling vaguely of vinegar. He was stretched on his back on a bright bed in a bright room, whose specific details remained blurry without his glasses. Palpating his ribs where he had been kicked, he discovered the area had been bandaged with a poultice, which left his fingers slightly sticky. You're awake. Tuesday's unmistakably cheery voice came from the indistinct figure that had just entered the room. Where am I? My room? Mom and I carried you up here after you fainted. You weigh more than you look. How long have I been out? Barely an hour. Just long enough for us to tend to your bruises. The eye already looks better. Really? White cabbage. It's marvelous for facial bruises. You just break the ribs and submerge it in hot water with vinegar. Fortunately, your own ribs aren't broken. How do you know? Kinesiology. Kinesiology? Muscle testing. It's a way of asking the body what's happening with it. You can even muscle test on behalf of somebody else. Your ribs are just bruised. We put some arnica in the poultice to help with the pain and swelling. Tuesday came into focus as she sat down on the bed beside him. Despite the harrowing ordeal at school and her best friend collapsing in her living room, she looked typically upbeat. Here. These should help, she said, taking the cabbage leaf from his hand and sliding his glasses on his face. Instantly, his surroundings coalesced into a chaotic menagerie of a bedroom, so different from his own Spartan quarters, that appeared to have grown up organically, rather than being planned in any deliberate way. There was a telescope on a tripod beside the tall bay window. There was a guitar, featuring a Celtic pattern on the cushioned window seat. There was a ceiling-high bookshelf haphazardly stacked with classics from Dickens to Dickinson. There was an incense burner on a coffee table, flanked by two mismatched beanbags. There was a paint-stained writing desk with the crusted remains from Tuesday's breakfast of Irish pudding still in the bowl and an Earl Grey tea bag still in the mug. There were dozens of shoes scattered on the floor, none of which seemed to be near its mate. There were what appeared to be theatrical costumes strewn hither and thither. And there were exactly, Max counted them, 12 helium-filled balloons still nearly full stuck like colored gumballs to the ceiling. What do you think? Asked Tuesday. About what? My room. It's bright. You like it? Yeah. I like it. Me too. Anticipating more pain than he ended up experiencing, Max sat up stiffly. How do you feel? Wondered Tuesday. I felt better. Overall, though, things could be worse. You play guitar? I'm learning. When was your birthday? How did you know I just had a birthday? The balloons. They've barely even deflated. Very astute and grounded of you. perfectly Capricorn. I'm Sagittarius. So when was your birthday? Monday, December 16th. Jane Austen's birthday. Who's Jane Austen? To be so smart, you don't know anything about literature, do you? Max had to laugh, even though he expected his ribs would pay for it. They did, but not to the extent he feared. You didn't even have the decency to tell me, your one and only friend, that it was your birthday? You had a lot on your mind. Like what? Like the parent-principal meeting? Or have you already forgotten what had to be the worst week of your life? Not the worst week. My first week was my worst week. Right. Got you. Okay, the worst week you can remember. I still can't believe you didn't tell me it was your birthday. Sorry. Feel up to going downstairs? Mom's brewing some bilberry extract in the kitchen. For what? You. It fortifies capillaries and stabilizes the oxygen in your system to help bruises heal faster. I thought science wasn't your strong suit. It isn't. This is herbology. Max's shoes were nowhere to be found, so he followed Tuesday in sock feet. The upstairs had the feel of an old castle. You never knew when you might bump into a suit of armor, which Max literally did in the hallway, or a restless ghost, which, if one was about, kept to itself, emerging from one of many mysterious doors. From the foot of the staircase, Max and Tuesday could hear Ms. Monday in the kitchen speaking with someone on the phone. Yes, I realize it's school policy to sign out students when picking them up early. Max's ears pricking up, he whispered, "Oh my God. She must be talking to." "Hush," said Tuesday, cutting him off and listening intently. "You're right, Mr. Priestley," continued Ms. Monday. "The fault certainly wasn't Max's or Tuesday's, and I trust they won't get in trouble for my mistake. I simply forgot to sign them out when I arrived at school. I assure you it won't happen again." The two kids waited for her to hang up, then waited a few more seconds, staring at each other hugely and exultantly from the bottom of the staircase, before trying to look casual entering the sunlit kitchen. "I see you're up and about, Max," said Ms. Monday. "Your eyes looking better. How are the ribs?" "A little sore, but I'll be okay. Thanks for your help, Ms. Monday." "Please. Call me Maisie." Who was that on the phone? Tuesday wondered as innocently as possible. "Mr. Priestley." He called, asking where the two of you had gotten off to. "Oh. And I explained that when I picked you both up from school this afternoon, I unfortunately forgot to sign you out. A simple mistake on my part. Thanks for covering for us, Mom." "You're welcome. But don't make this a habit, young lady. The world may be shades of gray, but that doesn't mean I enjoy having to lie. Don't worry. It was just a really bad scene. And I want to hear all about it. But first, Max, sit down and drink this," said Maisie, pouring a steaming purplish concoction from a pot on the stove into a mug, which she set on the kitchen table. "Bilberry extract for your bruises. It's still piping hot. Be sure to blow on it." "Thanks, Maisie. For everything. Don't mention it." Max sat down and blew across the surface of the mug. The smell, almost sweet, could have been worse. The taste wasn't bad either, sort of like spicy herbal tea. "I added a few drops of stevia," said Maisie. "Stevia? A natural sweetener from a tropical plant. It's 300 times sweeter than sugar and doesn't cause diabetes. Or tooth decay," added Tuesday, flashing her big white teeth. "I can see that," said Max, who continued sipping the extract while taking in his surroundings. The kitchen, which was practically glowing, being on the same side of the house as Tuesday's room, and also featuring high ceilings, displayed a similarly organized chaos. Pots and pans hung from a rack suspended above an island beside the stove, 3 of whose gas burners were in use brewing pots of who knew what, which occupied the space between 2 sprawling countertops nearly covered with enigmatic clay crocks and drying herbs laid out on towels. The thought occurred to Max he was sitting in something rather like an alchemist's laboratory, or even a witch's kitchen, when a large, soft, and furry presence pressed up against his calf. Looking down between his legs, he discovered Merlin's green eyes staring up at him like two stars shining from a field of black. "He wants to spend time with you," said Tuesday. Max picked up the massive tomcat and, setting him in a comfortable position on his lap, proceeded to scratch him behind the ears, eliciting a deep, satisfied purring and causing the animal to close his eyes and apparently drift asleep. Meanwhile, mother and daughter joining Max at the table, Tuesday began recounting the story of the fight with Doug. When she got to the part where Max went out of body, she paused and looked at him as if asking permission to share this part of the tale. "It's all right," said Max. "Go ahead." Tuesday finished the story, describing from her point of view the luminous figure that stepped out of her friend and proceeded to offer a 20-second clinic in the art of self-defense. Maisie had remained silent during the entire narrative, staring at Max with virtually unblinking eyes that seemed too old, energetically, to belong to a relatively young and admittedly attractive woman with blazing red hair and tattoos decorating much of her fair skin. Initially, he felt uncomfortable under the weight of such intense scrutiny. But realizing there was no ill intent in it, only compassion mixed with curiosity, he began to return the gaze, examining Maisie even as she examined him. This was how he managed to see that all her tattoos were actually one huge tattoo, of some kind of gigantic, perhaps prehistoric bird. From talons that terminated around Maisie's wrists, the bird's wings stretched up her arms to her shoulders, where the bird's body was inked, culminating in an ornate head, eyes and beak encircling her neck in a manner that seemed to stare with her at whatever she was seeing. "Your tattoo," said Max almost as a question. "What about it?" asked Maisie. "Is it, by any chance, a thunderbird?" "Now, that's very interesting." "I told you Max was gifted, Mom," put in Tuesday. "What's interesting?" asked Max. "You're the first person ever to guess what my tattoo is without having to be told. I don't suppose you were born with the call?" It was Max's turn to find a question very interesting. "How did you know that?" he asked. "How did you know about my Thunderbird?" "I didn't know. It was just a lucky guess. My mother believed Thunderbirds were real. The memory just popped into my head." "So you believe thoughts like that just pop into your head?" "It's an expression." "But just for the sake of argument," continued Maisie, "where do you suppose intuitive thoughts pop into your head from?" "Well, science says all thoughts occur in your brain. Maybe thoughts pop into one part of the brain from another part." "Ah, science. What about it?" "Mom has pretty strong opinions on science," said Tuesday. "I suppose I do," said Maisie. "Let's just say science only sees what it wants to see." "Meaning?" asked Max. "That there are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in science's philosophy." "Shakespeare," whispered Tuesday. "You're talking about the notion," said Max, processing the thought aloud, "that there's an intelligence, some kind of consciousness, outside of us that we tap into with our brains like a radio picking up radio signals?" "That's exactly what I mean. It's a fascinating theory. Personally, I've always suspected it to be true. It just makes sense. And it sure explains a lot of strange phenomena. Like intuition? For starters. You're quick, Max. I'll give you that. But you've yet to scratch the surface of your potential. You think you were born with the call by accident? I have no idea why I was born like that. I take it you do. Not really. But I certainly don't believe in accidents. Mom tends to speak in riddles, observed Tuesday. You still haven't told me how you knew about my call, said Max. You have a double aura. It's quite rare. That's why it's so large. And a double aura indicates I was born with the call? It can. You really can see my aura. Plain as day. What does it look like? Think twin rainbow eggs. Tell me something else about who I am that I might not know, said Max. Okay. Give me your hand. My hand. I promise I won't bite. Max gently set down Merlin, who wasn't happy to be let go in the middle of his repose, as he yawned and butted Max's leg with his forehead. Maisie held Max's palm with long fingers and black fingernails about a foot in front of her face and nodded as she found what she was seeking. Just as I suspected. You have 2 lifelines. What does that mean? You live a double life. You mean like a spy? You know what I mean. Because of my dreams? You live in 2 worlds, Max. All of us do, to varying degrees. But for one reason or another, you've blended the worlds so totally they've both become real, and you've literally become 2 people. Max was wondering if Tuesday had let slip to her mother his recent dream featuring an older version of himself flying in formation beside him, when his friend, who had no small intuitive ability herself, said, "I didn't tell her anything, Max, if that's what you're wondering. You asked me not to." Chapter 13. Tell you what, said Maisie. I'll make us some fresh juice and a snack, and we can reconvene on the back porch to chat a bit more about this stuff. Metaphysics requires a lot of energy. Are you 2 hungry? Starving, said Max. Ditto, said Tuesday. In the meantime, perhaps Max would like to see the garden? I'll show him, said Tuesday. She led him back past the stairwell, through the cavernous living room, where Max slipped on his shoes, past a smaller room that appeared to be Maisie's tattoo parlor, onto a screened and furnished lanai, out a side door, down some steps, and into some kind of urban farm. Most of the backyard was cultivated in neat circular installations, ringed by large rocks, of different species of plants. There were many plants Max didn't recognize, but among those he did were beets, broccoli, cabbages, and carrots. Permaculture, explained Tuesday, noting the quizzical expression on her friend's face. Perma what? Max, is it just me, or am I always having to explain things to you? You're always having to explain things, he said, kneeling at the edge of a circle and touching a large white cabbage with a finger to verify that it was real. He had never seen an actual farm before, much less one like this. Do you really want to know what permaculture is? I asked, didn't I? Fair enough. Permaculture is a system of growing food based on year-round agriculture that relies on renewable resources and an ecosystem that's self-sustaining. Translated, you let nature take care of you all year while taking care of it without a lot of pesticides. Cool. I love new ideas. Actually, it's really old. It's the way things were done for centuries. What do you think? I think it's amazing, answered Max, standing back up and inhaling deeply. Just being in the Monday's garden was invigorating. Even the air out here is like food. I know what you mean. They just let you do this? The city, I mean? They don't like it. Sometimes they fine people. Mom says we'll know the world has truly changed when people start receiving citations for not growing gardens in their yards. Hey guys. Maisie called, as if on cue, from the lanai. Snack is served. The 2 children ran, laughing, back through the garden, up the steps and onto the porch. Max felt utterly exhilarated, and had completely forgotten about his injured eye and ribs. Maisie had set 3 glasses of practically fluorescent green juice and a large plate of cheese and fruit on a glass-topped coffee table. She sat in a wicker chair as Max and Tuesday plopped down on a matching love seat and started feeding their faces. Wow. This juice is different, said Max. You don't like it, said Maisie. I do like it. A lot. It's just really fresh. As fresh as it gets. I just juiced it. Max tasted the strong mineral sweetness of beets and carrots. Is everything in here from your garden? Not everything. The apples and jalapenos are from the Saturday farmers market. And I grow the wheatgrass on the front porch in a dry spot for better drainage to limit mold. Wheatgrass? It's a superfood, said Tuesday. It contains more nutrients than just about anything else. And it's just grass? Yes, basically. It's fantastic for decalcifying your pineal gland, said Maisie. Doing what to my pineal gland? Asked Max. Decalcifying it. The pineal gland is your third eye, the seat of mystical power and ancient wisdom traditions that many Hindus still mark with a bindi. She pointed to the center of her forehead. It's said to be the exit point for Kundalini, the serpent-like energy of enlightenment that travels up the chakras or major energy points along your spine. Descartes thought the pineal gland was where the soul resides. A French philosopher explained Tuesday. Not everything Maisie was sharing was Greek to Max. Over the course of his paranormal reading, he had encountered many of these concepts before, in one form or another. He just had never understood how to apply them, in any practical way, to his own experience. Why would I want to decalcify it? He asked. Because fluoride, chlorine, and other toxins in our water, food supply, and even toothpaste harden or calcify the pineal gland, making it less functional, said Maisie. This should be of particular interest to you, Max, given your proclivities. You're saying that certain foods, like wheatgrass juice, can increase psychic ability? That's exactly what I'm saying. In fact, nearly any kind of green leafy vegetable will help. And other things like chemicals decrease it? You are what you eat. Far out. I always thought food was just food. Unless it's soul food, quipped Tuesday. Speaking of, these are really flavorful apple slices, Mom. The cheddar's good too, said Max. It's raw, said Tuesday. Glad you're enjoying everything, said Maisie. Now, let's talk a little about your astral body, Max. My astral body? Do you realize you often repeat things back to people as a question? Sorry. I guess it just gives me time to think so I don't sound stupid. That's a curious conversational strategy. I think it's kind of endearing, said Tuesday. So what's an astral body? Asked Max. It may be what you saw during your fight. Though I have to admit, I've never heard of one popping out in the middle of a crowd like that during broad daylight. Usually they're solitary aspects of our being, confined to our dreams and sometimes daydreams. I see it in my dreams as well. Come to think of it, I was dreaming. I was out cold for a minute there, and then I got up sleepwalking. That doesn't surprise me. Max felt the by now familiar nudging against his leg, reached down without even bothering to look, and set Merlin on his lap for another scratching. Tell me, said Maisie, do you ever see a silver cord attached to your astral body when you're dreaming? A silver cord? You're doing it again. Sorry. Well, yes, now that you mention it. But it's more like a thin ribbon. It's almost invisible and seemingly can stretch forever. What is it exactly? It's the connection between your waking and dreaming selves. It's made of the same subtle energy as your aura and kundalini. The Taoists called this energy qi. If you can visualize the silver cord right now, where would you say it attaches to your physical body? To my pineal gland, my third eye. And where does it connect to your dreaming self? To the back of my head, I'd say, though I can't actually see the connection point. Textbook. It's all just textbook, Max. You really are astral projecting. Is there anything particularly strange about your dreams? Tuesday actually burst out laughing at this question, and Max couldn't help following suit. There, with a full belly on the room temperature lanai overlooking the permaculture garden on a gorgeous December late afternoon, the psychodrama that was Max's life suddenly seemed surreal, absurd, and hilarious beyond words. I gather there's more to this story, said Maisie, which only made the two children laugh harder, to the point of doubling over and slapping their knees as they wheezed. That's putting it lightly, Tuesday finally managed to say between fits of giggling. Would you care to clue in your mother? Do you mind if I tell her, Max? Be my guest, he laughed. If she doesn't think I'm a freak by now, she never will. After a minute, the two kids were able to compose themselves. While Max scratched Merlin and, prompted by Maisie, finished off the last of the cheese and fruit, Tuesday, with her typical literary style, proceeded to weave Max's history of increasingly bizarre dreams into something resembling a short story. Max listened along with Maisie, nearly as fascinated as she was, as his own life was laid out in the third person, starting with his earliest notable dreams, continuing through his learning how to bring objects back from the dream world, and ending with his latest visionary dream of himself and his father disappearing into the vortex. When Tuesday finished, Maisie remained quiet for a moment, then said, "That's some heavy stuff." Does your father know all of this, Max? Most of it. Now, anyway. Everything except my last dream. What does he make of it? He's still making up his mind. I think you should pull a card. A card? What kind of card? A tarot card. It's a form of divination, a way of comprehending oneself better in the past, present, and future. Like palm reading? Something like that. Would you like to pull one? It could shed light on why these things are happening to you. Sure. Why not? Tuesday, honey, please go get the little deck. I think it's in the parlor. Tuesday was only gone a few seconds, before sitting back down and handing her mother a small black deck called the World Spirit Tarot and an accompanying booklet explaining the significance of the individual cards. Making space on the coffee table, Maisie shuffled the deck several times with practiced fingers before spreading out the cards face down. Now run your hand over the cards, she instructed Max. Don't touch them. Just feel them. Ask your higher guidance to help you select the one card that most clearly speaks to who you are and who you are endeavoring to become. Max suppressed the scientific urge to laugh off this ritual as superstitious foolishness. Recalling the epigraph to his mother's field journal, I shall not commit the fashionable stupidity of regarding everything I cannot explain as a fraud, he resisted reaching a premature conclusion regarding something about which he knew virtually nothing, and instead opened his mind and did as he was counseled. Merlin suddenly stirred from sleep, opened his eyes, and watched with Maisie and Tuesday as Max ran his hand over the cards, trying to feel them with his fingertips and asking for guidance. Selecting a card that seemed hot, for lack of a better way to describe the odd sensation, he carefully pulled it from the spread. Flip it over, said Tuesday. He did. The card showed a muscular blue man hanging from a tree limb by a rope attached to one foot, grasping an arrow behind his back with both hands, his long black hair dangling down into a sunken whirlpool the same color as his skin. What does it mean? Max asked, seeing the serious look on Maisie's alabaster face framed by coils of scarlet hair. It's the Hanged Man, she said in a distant, philosophical voice. That certainly explains a lot. It really does, said Tuesday in a similar tone of amazement and respectfulness. The Hanged Man? Asked Max. That's bad, right? I mean, it can't be good to be hanged. It's not that simple, said Maisie. Would you like me to read about this card? Do I have any other choice? You always have a choice. Okay. Fire away. Maisie opened the little booklet to the page that discussed the Hanged Man and read, Suspended between the worlds, the Hanged Man links heaven and earth. He is a visionary, a shaman, a mystic. His connection with the ethereal realm imbues him with psychic powers. So I'm supposed to be some kind of modern-day medicine man? Max asked incredulously. Try to think about it in a more non-linear way. This card is not you. It merely speaks to you, offering insights wherever they apply. Shall I continue? Sure. When the Hanged Man appears, Maisie went on, some element of your life is on hold. You may feel vulnerable and be questioning things you've always taken for granted. Your world may even feel upside down. You got that right, interjected Max. But have faith. Allow yourself to be in suspense for a while. Let go of having every answer. It may not make any sense to you right now, but a reversal of ideas could be exactly what's needed. Is that it? No. There's a little more. Shall I finish? Please. The Hanged Man often asks for a sacrifice in exchange for his wisdom. Feelings of being stuck or trapped persist only as long as you cling to your usual perspective. If you are willing to give up some belief or attitude that no longer serves you, your reward will be well worth it. You will gain a deeper understanding of your life, and with this new perspective, old dilemmas and chronic problems can be resolved. While Maisie was reading, Max instinctively saw the vortex from his dream as the whirlpool into which the Hanged Man's hair was dipping. The arrow behind his back suggested someone who could navigate in two different directions, or worlds. He shivered, though it wasn't cold, with the sense that the card really was speaking to him. There now, Max, said Tuesday with her usual cheerfulness, which she somehow managed to maintain even in the face of adversity. That doesn't seem so bad, does it? Chapter 14. To say Max had a lot to chew on during the ride back home would be a vast understatement. He sat in the passenger seat of the Monday's Winnebago, with Tuesday behind and Maisie at the wheel, staring up through citrus trees lining the sidewalks at an immaculate early evening sky, miles away in his mind from South Florida. He had just had a condensed education, and it didn't take place at school. While many long-standing questions had been answered by Maisie, in one way or another, his thoughts were spinning like river eddies with even more questions. The biggest question, of course, transcending physics and the realm of how he was able to do the extraordinary things he did, remained firmly rooted in the realm of metaphysics and begged an answer to why he could do these things. He could still remember the last words, echoing in memory's chambers, Maisie had read aloud. The hanged man often asks for a sacrifice in exchange for his wisdom. Feelings of being stuck or trapped persist only as long as you cling to your usual perspective. If you are willing to give up some belief or attitude that no longer serves you, your reward will be well worth it. You will gain a deeper understanding of your life, and with this new perspective, old dilemmas and chronic problems can be resolved. What kind of sacrifice was required of Max to gain wisdom? And how could he shift his perspective enough so he no longer felt a victim of his seemingly haphazard gifts, and might harness them by becoming their master? "I bet your mind's racing," commented Tuesday as if she had been listening to his thoughts, placing her hand on his shoulder in a supportive gesture. "You can say that again." "But I won't," she joked. "Don't forget Joseph Campbell's words of wisdom," said Maisie. "You mean to follow your bliss?" asked Tuesday. "That too," said Maisie. "But I was actually talking about another quote." "Who's Joseph Campbell?" asked Max. "A famous writer on comparative mythology. He said, opportunities to find deeper powers within ourselves come when life seems most challenging." "That sounds about right." He called periods of trial by fire, like yours, the hero's journey. "I'll buy trial by fire. But you can keep the hero part." "Well, you're certainly not the villain," interjected Tuesday in an impromptu literary analysis of Max's character. "So you must be the hero." Max directed Maisie through the ritzy residential neighborhood of Oceanside to his sprawling one-story ranch-style house, which seemed as wide as the Monday's three-story Victorian was tall. The two dwellings struck Max as like water and fire, elementally incompatible. "We do live in different worlds," he told Tuesday, observing with new eyes the manicured cookie-cutter unreal quality of the toy houses and lawns along Tupelo Street. "It doesn't matter. If you get bored with yours, you can come over to my world anytime you like." When they pulled in the driveway, Captain Diver's Jeep was nowhere to be found. Max figured his father was out looking for him, and was going to be royally displeased with his son even more than he already was when he returned. It was almost 6 o'clock, and Max was supposed to have been home soon after 3. "I'd invite you both in," said Max, "but I don't think my dad will be in a very entertaining mood when he gets home. He doesn't even know about my fight yet." "God. I forgot all about that," said Tuesday. "Me too. Almost. You won at least." "At least. I do have some things for the two of you, though, if you don't mind waiting here just a second." "We can do that," said Maisie. Max grabbed his backpack, exited the van, hurried inside his house, which compared to the Monday's funhouse felt empty in more ways than one, tossed his bag on his bed, retrieved the Lego box from his closet, and found what he was seeking. "These are for you," he told Maisie, dropping a handful of Sasha Inchy seeds in her palm through the open van window. "They're from Peru." "Incan peanuts," she exclaimed. "I've never eaten dream food before." "Me neither," Max laughed. "You know, they may not look like much," said Maisie. "But they're the food highest in omega-3 fatty acids on the planet. Which means they're really, really good for you." "Thanks, Max." "You're welcome, Maisie." "Thank you." "You're welcome." "And this is for you, Tuesday. Happy late birthday. I thought it would go well with your hair." He held out the Celtic bracelet from his dream. I brought it back from Ireland, I think. Mom and I are both Irish, said Tuesday. Well, our ancestors were. The bracelet, which looked to be a mixture of interwoven white and yellow gold, was thin but extremely intricate, like a braided rope or multi-stranded helix of DNA twisting in two tones around itself endlessly, and fit like a charm when she slipped it on her wrist. That's some bracelet, said Maisie in an astonished voice. Is it real? I mean, is it an antique? Asked Tuesday. I'm not sure, said Max. Maybe. Probably. I retrieved it from some kind of archaeological dig. It's cool. I mean, it's beautiful. Breathtaking even. Uncharacteristically, Tuesday seemed nearly at a loss for words. Are you sure you want to give this to me? It must be worth a lot. Money I have, or at least my dad does. But friends, not so much. I want you to have it. That's incredibly generous of you. Thanks for this, Max. I'll never forget it. She reached out the window and hugged him. Awkwardly and self-consciously, Max returned the hug. Is that your dad? Asked Maisie. I believe that's him. Max's heart sank as he immediately let go of Tuesday and tried to compose himself. The new white Jeep pulled up alongside the old black Winnebago. It occurred to him that even the two families' vehicles were polar opposites. Captain Diver cast a quick eye on his son as he got out of the Jeep, assessing with military efficiency whether Max was okay, despite the watermelon hue around his eye, and what might be going on with two strange females parked in his driveway. But keeping his thoughts and emotions, whatever they were, in check, all he said was, I see you're home. Yeah. Sorry for being so late. Dad, this is Tuesday from school and her mother Maisie. This is my dad. Never one to be shy, Tuesday said. Pleased to meet you, Captain Diver. I read your biography. You read my biography? Don't you have better things to do? He joked. It was a classic Devarian icebreaker delivered with ease and authenticity, and everyone laughed, relieved. Pleased to meet you too. Lovely bracelet. Thanks, said Tuesday, seemingly unsure whether to divulge that Max had just given it to her. I'm Thomas, said Max's father, shaking Tuesday's mother's hand. Maisie. I know. I've seen you occasionally at PTA meetings. Oh, I hate those tacky things. I only attend when my guilt at not having attended reaches a certain level. It was Thomas's turn to be made to laugh. Same here, he admitted. Look. I'm sure you and Max will discuss today's events. But I want you to know, from my perspective, he's a great kid. I realize that. And he's my best friend, added Tuesday. Please go easy on him, Captain Diver. Nothing that happened today was his fault. I'll keep that in mind. When the Mondays left them standing alone in the twilit driveway at last, Max's father turned to him and asked, So is that your girlfriend? No. Just my best friend. She's got potential. Wait a few years. I bet she'll look like her mother. He never once asked about the bracelet, though he surely registered that Max had given it to Tuesday. Probably being fair-minded and not in the least covetous, he figured it was Max's to give to whomever he liked. How's the eye? Could be worse. Do you want to talk about it? Yes. But not right this instant, if that's okay with you. I think I just want to be alone this evening. Would you like something to eat? I'm not hungry. Fair enough. His father draped a muscular arm around his shoulders, and Max smelled the familiar, comforting scent of Old Spice. But I'm here if you need me. I know. Thanks, Dad. Don't mention it. In his exhausted dream that night, in which he could feel his eye socket and ribs throbbing, Max found himself walking through a dense forest at dusk. Glancing at his hands, he was surprised to discover they were perfectly blue. When he looked behind him, his silver cord shimmered its way back through the dark trees until it was lost from sight. He came to a clearing where a natural whirlpool, seemingly lit from below, cast glowing reflections of ripples all around. Kneeling beside it, His long hair, perhaps wet from rain in the forest, in whose branches he could hear the wind, nearly touching the water's steaming surface, he was greeted by a blue face that he mistook for his reflection, until he realized the face was making independent movements that didn't correspond to his own. "Thank you for coming," said the blue face, which otherwise, except for the bindi in the middle of the forehead, was identical to his own face. "I cannot express how glad I am you received my message. He desperately needs your help." "Who?" asked Max, not knowing what else to say. "You must come to him. I cannot do this alone." "Do what alone? Who are you?" "My name is Max," said the blue face, just as a howling wind bent the forest and extinguished all the lights, and Max sat bolt upright in bed with the early morning sun glowing behind the curtains. Chapter 15. It was just before 7, according to his alarm clock, when Max wandered through the house in his pajamas, disoriented by his dream of meeting another Max, in search of his father. He looked for him in the kitchen, the living room, the study, the guest bedroom where Aunt Nadine stayed when babysitting, even the garage, but Captain Diver was nowhere to be found. As a military man, his father had always been an early riser, which explains why it occurred to his son last that he might still be in his bedroom. Silently gliding across the carpet barefoot, that was where, unnoticed, Max discovered him. At that early hour, his father had no reason to suspect he wasn't alone. He was seated, dressed in jeans and a blue Naval Academy t-shirt, on the bed beside his wife's old Seward trunk, its hinged lid open to reveal its contents, staring, lost in memory, at her Egyptian scarab hairpin in his palm. The scene sucker-punched Max. He never saw it coming. It encapsulated in one poignant instant the tragic beauty of his family history. Still disoriented by his dream, his emotions nearly got the best of him, and he instinctively sucked in his breath to keep from sobbing. His father heard the sound and turned, only mildly surprised, still lingering over thoughts that had to be that much more bitter in the end for being so sweet at the beginning, to examine his son in the doorway. "Sorry for disturbing you, Dad. She was wearing this when I first saw her," said his father in a distant voice. "Sort of to the side of her head in that amazing hair of hers." Max didn't know what to say. He had never heard his father speak with such tender honesty about his mother. "I can come back if you like." "That's okay. I was just having a moment. Forgive me. I tend to miss her this time of year especially." "Me too. Even though I never knew her. You're just like her. Brilliant. Headstrong. Different. Too different." "Hey, varieties the spice of life," Captain Diver said as he carefully replaced the hairpin, latched the lid, and slid the trunk back beneath the bed. "You're up early." "I couldn't sleep." "You couldn't sleep? Okay. I had a bad dream." "Another one, huh?" "Yeah. Care to talk about it?" "Not really." "You hungry?" "Ravenous. But not for oatmeal." "I was afraid you'd outgrow my oatmeal someday," his father said, only half-jokingly. "Why don't you grab a shower, brush your teeth and put some clothes on?" "Where are we going?" "Out to breakfast." "Where?" "That's for me to know and you to find out." A little over an hour later, having parked the Jeep downtown, Captain Diver led his son the length of an alleyway into a hole-in-the-wall restaurant whose fluorescent sign in the window read Juanita's. "What is this place, Dad?" asked Max, looking around the packed miniature dining room that smelled of decades of cigars, strong coffee, pork fat, black beans, and rice. "This place, my friend, serves the finest Cuban food outside Cuba." "I thought it was illegal for Americans to visit Cuba because of the embargo." "It is." "Have you ever been to Cuba?" "Not officially." "Hola, ¿cómo estás, Thomas?" exclaimed a full-bodied Hispanic lady with graying hair in a bun on seeing Max's father at the register. "Muy bien, Juanita." "Muchas gracias," replied Captain Diver in perfect Spanish. "Y usted?" "Muy bien, gracias." "Ocupada, como siempre?" "Sí, como siempre." "This is my son, Max." Que rico! Exclaimed Juanita, who, turning to Max, spoke in English with a thick accent. You look exactly like her. I loved your mother. A formica table beside the window was just opening up. With a whistle to the busboy, Juanita saw that it was cleared and wiped clean, then seated Captain Diver and Max herself. I'll be right back with your menus, she said. Max had no idea what to expect when his father said he was taking him to breakfast. Certainly, he didn't see this coming, any of it. I had no idea you spoke Spanish, he said. Not like that anyway. It's a little rusty, I'm afraid. Where did you learn? Off the record? If it has to be. Cuba. Here are your menus, said Juanita, reappearing and disappearing in a flurry to greet two new customers at the door. How do you even know about this place? Asked Max. Oh, I've been coming here nearly 20 years, ever since I entered the space program. This was where I brought your mother on our first date. We used to eat here regularly. Seriously? Seriously. I wish I could have been a fly on the wall, listening to your first face-to-face conversation. It was pretty one-sided, I'm afraid. She mostly talked and I mostly listened. I couldn't take my eyes off her. Juanita reappeared to take their orders. Max realized he hadn't even glanced at the menu. Un momento, por favor, said Captain Diver. Claro. What was Mom's favorite breakfast dish? Asked Max. We used to order a medley. Would you like me to order the same for us? That would be great. Okay, Juanita. Nos gustaría tostadas, croquetas, fufu, jugo de mango. Sí. Café cubano y café con leche. ¿Qué más? Nada gracias. Muy bien. Max was amazed to hear such fluent Spanish coming out of his father's American mouth. There was clearly a lot more to this man, in any number of ways, than met the eye. When Juanita was gone and the busboy had brought ice water with lime, Max asked, What did you order for us? Buttered and toasted Cuban bread for starters. Sounds good? What else? Ham croquetas, which are breaded and fried creamed ham rolls. Keep going. And fufu, a dish made with green plantains, onion, and in this case bacon. I'm glad we're not watching our weight. Yes, let's give thanks for having been born with high metabolisms. I also ordered mango juice and coffee. I hope you like everything. I'm sure I will. I guess you're wondering why I've asked you here today? Is that supposed to be a joke? No. You are wondering, aren't you? Well, I have a pretty good idea. There are at least two reasons. First, you want to know about my fight at school. Yes? And you also spoke with Dr. Morrow. That's right. Is there another reason? Yes. But it's about me. We'll get to that. Fair enough. You want to start with the fight? Sure. Max recounted the bizarre episode in its entirety from start to finish, pulling no punches, literally or figuratively. Just as he finished, Juanita brought black café cubano for Captain Diver and creamy café con leche for him. Try it before adding sugar, she said. It's already muy dulce. Being unaccustomed to coffee of any kind, Max feared he might not like it, and was pleasantly surprised to find that it was delicious. It's excellent, he said, blowing across the steaming liquid and taking another sip. Not too sweet? Asked Juanita. Just sweet enough. Muy bien. So how's your eye this morning? Asked Captain Diver when they were alone again. Sore. It doesn't look too bad. And the ribs? Really sore. You think we should get them checked out? No. They'll be fine. So what did Doug look like? Not so good. Though I didn't exactly stick around to ask how he was doing. What if I told you you broke his collarbone? Broke? You can't be serious. Ah, but I am. How do you know? A little bird told me. Come on, Dad. Get real. Let's just say news travels fast on the naval grapevine. Captain Biggins and I go way back. Who's Captain Biggins? Doug's father. As if he needed another reason to hate me. Why does he hate you? He was passed over when I was selected to become an astronaut. That kind of snub can run deep in a career military man. The proverbial light bulb flashed on in Max's mind. So that's why Doug likes to pick on me so much, he said. That would be my guess. Though not anymore, I'd wager. No, not anymore. Thank God. Is he okay? They set the bone. He'll be okay when it heals up. Max, have you been studying any kind of martial art I don't know about? No. Swear. I swear. And you're absolutely sure this astral body beat him up like that? Positive. Tuesday saw it, though I don't think anybody else did. She can vouch for me. She doesn't have to. I believe you. You do. I do. Because of what Dr. Morrow said about me? Let's just say my conversation with Dr. Morrow was eye-opening. Juanita returned bearing several plates of exotic food and 2 frothing glasses of fresh mango juice. Buen provecho, she said. Muchas gracias, Juanita, said Captain Diver. Eye-opening, asked Max. How? I don't have all the technical language. Basically, he said the readings from your brain that night in the hospital were indicative of someone with highly advanced psychic ability. It's the kind of thing observed in people exhibiting telekinesis, or the ability to move objects with the mind. Have you ever heard of remote viewing? You mean where the government employs specially trained psychics to access classified information by spying at a distance? How do you know about that? I read a book about it. That's one application of the technique. Is that what Dr. Morrow's really involved in? What makes you say that? Come on, Dad. Do you think I'm so naive as to believe the Navy sponsors research in sleep disorders? Captain Diver laughed. Hard to believe you're not even 12. Yes, off the record. Dr. Morrow would appreciate the chance to study you a bit more. At least, he doesn't think I'm crazy. No, he doesn't think you're crazy. I don't either. Eat up before your food gets cold. On his father's suggestion, Max tried dipping the tostadas in his cafe. Then he tried the croquetas and fufu, which he particularly liked. Better than oatmeal? Much better. It's delicious. Especially the fufu. That was your mother's favorite. You say Dr. Morrow wants to study me? That was his word. I don't think he meant in any sort of invasive way. Why? So he can determine if he wants to train me to be his little spy monkey? Not to my knowledge. Perhaps he could glean things from you that could help him train others. Look, I wouldn't be bringing this up if I didn't think it's an opportunity to learn more about who you are. Who I am? You know what's going on with your abilities. Dr. Morrow could help you. Control them better. Or do you want to go around breaking people's collarbones forever? Very funny. We're talking about someone who works for the same government that won't even let Americans visit Cuba, Dad. Officially. I realize that. The same government, the one you work for, puts toxic fluoride in the water supply. This glass of water, said Max, holding his glass up to the light from the window, contains poison. And we're just supposed to drink it, no questions asked. What's your point? I thought this was a free country, Dad. It is a free country. Maybe for some. Don't get me wrong, I respect your patriotism because it's obviously genuine. But why would I, knowing what I know, want to help people who insist on hurting other people? Max, who considered himself a pacifist, found himself in the middle of his second fight in less than 24 hours. In many ways, this one was even worse than a fistfight, because he had never so much as argued with his father. Captain Diver, though his son's words had to sting, took them on the chin like a man. He downed half his glass of mango juice and said, I respect your opinions, even if I don't agree with all of them. I also know it's easy to be idealistic when we're young. But the world, Max, is run by pragmatists. Do you think my mother believed it was a good thing for the world to be run by pragmatists? No. I'm quite aware she believed just the opposite. But I loved her. And I love you. That's why I do what I do. I know. I love you too, Dad. I know. You certainly don't have to see Dr. Morrow if you don't want to. I'll think about it. I appreciate that. There's no pressure, though. This needs to be your decision. Thanks. That means a lot. Which brings us to the third reason I brought you here today. Before Captain Diver could continue, Juanita swung by to check on them. You like the food? She asked the boy. It's great, said Max. Muy bien. Más agua aquí, Jose, she called to the busboy, who promptly refilled their nearly empty glasses. I gather it wasn't to sample Cuban food, said Max, picking up where his father had left off. Not exactly. I'm thinking about dating again. Dating? I haven't been out with a woman since I dated your mother. I noticed that. I'm sure you did. Why not? I guess I wasn't ready. And now you are? As of this morning, yes, I believe so. I'd like to ask out Maisie if it's okay with you. Max thought there was no way he could be surprised over breakfast more than he already was, but he was wrong. Maisie? As in, Tuesday's mother? I understand if this feels a little weird. It's not that. It's just, you two are very different. Don't forget, Max, I married your mother. I realize that. But Maisie, Dad, she's a witch. Come again. I don't mean she's ugly. To the contrary. I mean she's an actual witch. I think the more politically correct term is pagan. Well, you'll have to sort out the semantics with her. So do I hear a tacit yes? You don't need my permission, Dad. No. But I do want your blessing. Then you have it. Are you sure? I'm sure. I wouldn't want you to feel I'm doing anything to dishonor your mother's memory. Look, I think it's a wonderful idea, really, so long as you're up for a little mind expansion. I think Mom wouldn't wish you to be alone indefinitely. And you're not that old. Ha ha. We could go on a double date. Me with Maisie, you with Tuesday. Don't push your luck, Dad. Father and son smiled at one another, comically yet with genuine affection. After years of skimming along the surface with respect to their shared past, Max had the sensation they had finally, like the name they also shared, dived beneath the water's surface, and it wasn't nearly as cold as he had feared. Chapter 16. Christmas came and went. On the 23rd, Aunt Nadine came to dinner and gave Max a bulky new sweater, which he promptly placed on the stack of bulky sweaters, most given to him by his aunt, who hailed from the snowy northeast, hiding the Lego box in his closet, rarely, if ever, to be worn in South Florida. The next day, she flew to Connecticut to spend 2 weeks with her parents, Max's maternal grandparents, who, being unable to travel following Granddad Holden's recent hip surgery, sent Max a crisp $100 bill in a Hallmark card. Max stashed the bill in the Lego box with his other prized possessions and thanked his grandparents via telephone. On Christmas Eve, his paternal grandparents, Blake and Hetty Diver, who lived several hours up the road in Pensacola, showed up for 2 nights on their way to their timeshare in the Keys laden with armfuls of presents. Their haphazard generosity included a copy of Stedman's Medical Dictionary. Max had once expressed an interest in medicine, a snorkel and fins, an old-timey Rubik's Cube, which took Max only a few hours to solve, a set of 3 leather juggling balls, a right-handed Wilson infielder's glove. Unfortunately, Max didn't play baseball and was also left-handed, and a gallon jar of homemade rum balls Max loved above all other holiday sweets. Being unused to a lot of company, both growing up as only children, Max and his father seemed somewhat relieved, though they didn't speak about it, when Christmas was officially over, and it was finally just the 2 of them again. Captain Diver never gave Max a lot of presents, but the ones he did give rarely missed their mark. This year was no different. Father and son spent the better part of 3 days in the study, starting when they were alone again on the 26th, assembling and painting Max's present, an exact replica, enormous for a miniature, of the International Space Station. She was quite a jewel, endorsed by NASA, featuring genuine miniature solar panels, and required considerable skill and artistry to complete. When she was done, Max couldn't tell who was more pleased, himself or his father. Even so, the real fun of the holiday season was scheduled for New Year's Eve, also celebrated as Max's birthday. Normally, this wasn't the case, given that the date was fraught with ambivalence for both Captain Diver and his son, and Aunt Nadine for that matter, whenever she was around. But this year, with Max turning 12, though still bittersweet in many respects, the 31st couldn't arrive fast enough. It was the most anticipated New Year's Eve ever for father and son, who both acted rather silly in their overflowing excitement, truth be known, because this year they were entertaining. Not that they themselves were entertaining, though a fly on the wall, watching them giddily clean the house as never before, might have found them so. No, they were entertaining company, and the company happened to be Maisie and Tuesday. The Mondays had accepted the Divers' invitation to join them for the day, in celebration of Max's birthday and New Year's Eve. It was, in effect, Thomas's first date with Maisie, which explains why he acted more like a teenager with raging hormones than himself for the better part of the holiday week. Max was just as deliriously happy, but for different reasons. Despite his father's adolescent jokes about their impending double date, Tuesday was more of a sister than a girlfriend, which made Max wonder whether she might actually become his sister someday. His sister-in-law, anyway. Would their parents getting married reinforce or ruin their friendship? How would the two of them get along under one roof? Where would that roof be, Tupelo Street or downtown? What would it be like to have Maisie for a mother-in-law? Max realized he was getting ahead of himself, but stranger things had happened, and that was no mere aphorism in his case. A stranger thing happened the night of the 30th, in fact. A much stranger thing. In his dream, walking through yet another forest, he happened on the entrance to what appeared to be an enormous cave. And he wasn't alone. He found himself staring at an 8-foot humanoid, which somehow struck him as familiar, towering over him in a mass of muscle and thick, ruddy fur. His initial impulse was to flee into the forest. But figuring that the creature, whatever it was, could run faster than he could with its gigantic strides, and seeing that it wasn't aggressive, he mastered his fear and looked directly into its oval face. He was amazed to discover that it looked almost human. Its eyes were slightly reddish, its pug nose was large but perfectly formed in its hairless face of grayish skin, and except for a cone-shaped head, it could have been exactly what it looked like, a large hirsute person. You're Bigfoot, aren't you?" he gasped in his dreaming voice. There were reports and legends of Florida Bigfoots known as skunk apes, but this wasn't Florida. On examination, everything seemed much bigger, as if belonging to a different world that was much older. The creature made no reply, except for what might have been the faintest of smiles pursing its dark, meaty lips. Turning, it gestured with a long arm and hand, like the underside of a cowhide, for the boy to follow into the yawning blackness of the cave. Once again, Max awoke to daylight, even as he was swallowed up by the darkness of his dream. What was that about? He wondered aloud. Trying to shake off the cobwebs, he got up, stretched, used the bathroom, and wandered down the hall. It was just after 7:30, judging by the stove clock, when he found a note on the kitchen table from his father saying he had gone running on the beach, something he once did routinely, but to which he had only returned over the past couple of weeks. Wasting no time, remembering something possibly related to his dream, Max took advantage of his father's absence to access his mother's field journal in the Seward trunk. He sat cross-legged on the floor beside the open trunk that smelled of must, opened the old leather notebook carefully so as not to exacerbate the slight rip in its binding, and flipped through the stained pages, soon locating the one he sought. Sure enough, staring at him with the same deep eyes, wide nose, and pointed head, was his mother's sketch, done while on an expedition in the primeval redwood forests of the Pacific Northwest, of the creature she identified with a single word scribbled underneath: Sasquatch. Max had been drawn to this particular sketch the first time he looked in the journal. Fascinatingly and improbably, his mother's illustration and the Bigfoot from his dream could have been the same creature. Was this just a coincidence? Had he simply dreamed of this creature because he had once been imprinted by a drawing of it? Was his subconscious merely playing a trick on him? Or was there something weirder at work here? You ready for the big day, Max? Captain Diver, breathing hard in a Naval Academy sweatshirt drenched with sweat from his jog, asked excitedly, grinning and rubbing his hands together from the doorway. Chapter 17. Tuesday and her mother arrived just past noon, pulling into the driveway in their dusty black Winnebago and getting out in shorts and t-shirts under which they were wearing bikinis. Max and his father were waiting in swim trunks and t-shirts themselves. Just in the past few days, the weather had gone from chilly for South Florida to unseasonably warm, bordering on hot at nearly 80 degrees under a neon blue sky. The plan was to spend the afternoon at the beach, then return for dinner and a movie, before capping off the evening by watching Cape Carnival's fireworks display over the Gulf. "You're here," said Max as he approached the van. "Where else would we be?" said Tuesday through her open window, staring cheerfully with oversized eyes from behind her glasses. "Your face looks almost normal. Where you got punched, I mean." "Can we help with anything?" asked Captain Diver. "Sure," said Maisie, who climbed out and casually squeezed Max's shoulder with fingernails freshly painted red to match her fiery hair. "Why don't you two grab our bags and we'll carry the presents?" "Will do," said the captain. "Careful with mine. It's the canvas tote. I stashed a bottle of Burgundy in it for later." "Roger that." Watching their somewhat awkward greeting, which felt polite but stiff, Max wondered if his father and Maisie, who lived not in different worlds but arguably in different galaxies, could actually get along, or if it was a classic case of an apple and an orange. Then again, his mother had been a nectarine. "Lovely day," said Captain Diver, holding open the front door for the ladies, who each carried a large rectangular present. Maisie's was a good bit bigger, wrapped in metallic silver paper. "It's a beauty," Maisie agreed. "It's hot," said Tuesday. Mother and daughter placed their presents on the coffee table, while father and son set the two bags on the couch. "I'm thirsty," said Tuesday. "Can I get you something to drink?" asked Max. "What have you got?" "Well, you'll be pleased to know I made Dad promise not to buy any more soft drinks." "I'm taking care of my pineal gland," said Max with a wink. "We've got grapefruit juice, lemonade, iced tea and Perrier." "And sangria," said Captain Diver. "For the adults." "Too bad," said Tuesday. "I'll have a Perrier." "What would you like, Maisie?" asked Max. "Make that too," she said. "If I start drinking this early, I'll fall asleep before the fireworks." "Coming right up." "I'll help," said Tuesday. "Is this weird for you?" whispered Max as he led Tuesday into the kitchen. "You mean my mom and your dad?" "Yeah." "Not particularly. She thinks he's cute." "What do you think?" "I think he's cute too." "No. I mean about the two of them getting together." "Oh. Well, I really don't mind. They're grown-ups, after all. What about you?" "I just want to make sure, whatever happens, we're still friends." Tuesday wiggled the gold bracelet on her wrist, alongside her signature toothy smile. "You worry too much, Max. We'll always be friends." An hour later, having chatted over drinks around the coffee table, the four trekked the 2 blocks to Oceanside Beach, armed with beach towels and beach bags, a cooler Max's father had packed with bottled water and ham sandwiches, snorkels and fins, a paddleball set, and 2 boogie boards. "Isn't Oceanside Beach redundant?" wondered Tuesday as they made their way across the sand sprinkled with broken seashells. "I also thought the same thing myself too as well," quipped Max. "That's pretty good. That's almost literary of you, Max." "They're like 2 peas in a pod," Captain Diver remarked. "I'm happy for them," replied Maisie. They both needed a sounding board. "Because lately I've been sounding bored," commented Tuesday, overhearing her mother. Given the uncommon weather and the fact it was a holiday, the beach could have been a lot more crowded. They settled in at a spot near the lifeguard stand directly in front of Lighthouse Rock, Aka Dolphin Point, jutting out into the Gulf. "I don't think we'll be doing much boogie boarding," observed Max in light of the uncommon number of shell fragments on the beach, which posed a risk to both board and rider. Let's go shelling instead, said Tuesday. Shelling? You know, looking for shells. Okay. Care for some paddle ball? Captain Diver asked Maisie, brandishing the paddles. I'm game. But only as long as you actually try to beat me. No deferring to the so-called fair sex, all right? All right. Let's leave them to their little mating ritual, whispered Tuesday. Max chuckled as they left their parents to their game and strolled down the beach, feeling the salty Gulf breeze on their skin, and listening to the cries of the gulls and the sound of countless shells clicking as they were pushed along by the tepid waves lapping their ankles. Stopping suddenly, Tuesday picked up a gray-white, perfectly formed sand dollar, its five-pointed design resembling a symmetrical plant leaf. Won't you look at that, she said, holding it in her outstretched palm for Max to see. I don't think I've ever found a whole sand dollar before. It's called a test. It's the endoskeleton of the sand dollar sea urchin. I've only found a few whole ones myself. It's beautiful. There's another one. Sure enough, only a few feet away, amid the shell fragments on the wet sand, lay another unblemished sand dollar, smaller and even more delicate. Even as Tuesday bent to pick up the second sand dollar, Max spotted a third completely whole one and scooped it up before a fresh wave wrapped around his knees. I found one, he yelled. Me too, yelled Tuesday. Another one. No, two more. For some reason, owing to the mysteries of weather and ocean currents, there were sand dollars everywhere. Max and Tuesday zigzagged along the waterline, in rhythm with the waves, waiting to pounce as fresh deposits of sand dollars spilled up out of the sea. This is completely crazy, exclaimed Tuesday. Tell me about it. Have you ever seen anything like it? Never. It was like fishing when all you had to do to catch something was throw your line in the water. The experience was joyous, blissful even, and made time disappear. The two friends became more and more daring, pushing up against the incoming waves, stuffing their pockets with sand dollars, cradling sand dollars against their t-shirts. Finally, wet from head to toe and covered in sand, they simply couldn't carry a single sand dollar more, and headed back, exhausted but victorious. Look, Mom, we're rich, shouted Tuesday when they came within earshot of the two paddleballers. So fierce was the competition, Captain Diver had stripped off his shirt. Maisie was down to her turquoise bikini, revealing all but the tip of her Thunderbird tattoo's tail, and both players were drenched with sweat and dusted with a fine layer of sand. Wow, said Maisie between staccato breaths. Wow's right, said Max's father, breathing hard himself. You guys must have robbed the sand dollar bank. What do sand dollars mean, Mom, in terms of animal wisdom? Wondered Tuesday. Animal wisdom? Asked Captain Diver. You know, Dad, chided Max. When animals teach you things. Right. I have no idea, said Maisie. We'll have to do some research. In New Zealand, they're called sea cookies and snapper biscuits, said Max. How did you know that? Asked Tuesday. I did a report on them one year for biology class. Anybody else hungry? Asked Captain Diver. Everybody was famished. They devoured the ham sandwiches, which Max pointed out were mostly organic, and downed a bottle of water apiece. Then the kids stashed their loot of sand dollars in the empty cooler, stripped down to their bathing suits, and joined their parents for a swim. The water feels awesome, said Tuesday, soaking in the moment, literally. It's perfect, agreed Max. It did feel great, and everybody was in good spirits. Captain Diver and Maisie dunked each other, laughing and spluttering, several times, causing Max and Tuesday to roll their eyes. Really though, beneath their distant adolescent veneer, they were both happy their parents seemed happy together. If Max was self-conscious of his lanky body on land, in the water, it was a different story. On land, playing basketball or soccer, for example, he was all left feet, but in the water he was graceful and surprisingly powerful given his slender build. He and his father had a habit, whenever they swam at Oceanside Beach, of racing each other out to Lighthouse Rock and back, about 500 yards round trip. As a dyed-in-the-wool Navy man, his father prided himself above all other athletic talents on his aquatic skills. He always made sure to beat Max handily to show that, in astronaut parlance, he still had the right stuff. Today was a little different, though. Captain Diver produced 2 pairs of goggles from his pockets, handed Max one, and strapped on the other as he yelled, jumping the gun, "Race you!" He got a decent head start as Max fumbled with his goggles, before he too shot up off the sandy seafloor into a windmilling crawl, quickly catching up with Captain Diver. Tuesday and Maisie urged them both on with shrill cries from the receding shoreline. As Lighthouse Rock grew larger and larger straight ahead, feeling a new strength in his almost 12-year-old frame, Max pulled ahead of his father. He touched the rock first, by at least a couple seconds, which he had never done, but he also realized the race was only half over. Pushing off and starting back toward shore with as much strength as he could muster, Captain Diver still trailing, Max felt something bump against his belly from beneath the water's surface. It almost took his breath, more from surprise than physical force. Hoping it wasn't a shark, he stopped as his father sped past, spraying water with his strokes, and peered underwater while swimming in a circular motion. This time whatever it was bumped sideways against his shoulder. Raising his head above the water, he came face to face with a bottlenose dolphin grinning at him with a huge mouth full of glistening teeth and sparkling intelligent eyes. Max had occasionally seen dolphins in the Gulf, but he had never been approached by one. Bottlenose dolphins in particular tended to steer clear of humans, making this impromptu encounter all the more surprising. The dolphin grinned wider and made a loud clicking noise as if trying to tell him something, then nudged against his shoulder once again in what struck Max as yet another attempt at communication. "What's your name?" he asked, reaching up carefully and petting the dolphin's slick snout. Click, 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 went the dolphin, swaying beside him in the swells, its fins resting on his shoulders in a strangely hypnotic aquatic waltz, before clicking again, spinning away and disappearing like a spirit into the deep blue. Captain Diver was already standing on the sand, stretching after winning the race, beside Tuesday and her mother, who were sunbathing on beach towels and given their fair skin already starting to turn pink. "Good try, old sport," said his father in his best Great Gatsby imitation. "Better luck next time." "You'll never guess what just happened," said Max, bending over and catching his breath. "What happened?" asked Tuesday. "What kind of animal wisdom do dolphins represent?" "You saw a dolphin?" asked Maisie. "More than that. I just danced with one." "Cool," said Tuesday. "Interesting," said Maisie, sitting up and staring at Max intensely with what felt like X-ray vision. "Some cultures say they're nature's escorts." "Escorts? Where?" asked Max. "To the world beyond." "You mean like the afterlife?" "Not exactly. Though maybe that too. I'm talking about the reality that parallels our own." "Dewey Larson called it time-space," interjected Max's father, to everyone's amazement. "Time-space," said Maisie. "The counterpart to space-time, which is where we live." "Who was Dewey Larson?" asked Max. "An engineer who developed something called reciprocal theory. He wrote several books about the interface between what he called the material and the cosmic sectors, or space-time and its counterpart, time-space." "And you know about this how, Dad?" "Your mother. She wrote a brilliant article on it." "Now you tell me." "I thought you didn't believe in this kind of thing, Thomas," said Maisie, examining Captain Diver with new eyes, and perhaps new respect. "I never said I didn't believe. As a fellow engineer, I find it a rather fascinating notion, theoretically anyway, that our reality could be constantly interacting with a mirror reality." "Sort of like Alice in Wonderland," said Tuesday. "Yes, now that you mention it," agreed Captain Diver. "Reciprocal theory explains a lot of strange phenomena, like near-death experiences and so-called free energy technologies." "And visions?" said Maisie, considering this new perspective. "And visions. According to Larson, time-space is as real as space-time and is an actual landscape where duration or time becomes distance that we can travel to in our dreams," said Captain Diver, coolly watching Max as he spoke. "Far out," said Tuesday. With the sensation that he was passing through the looking-glass, Max stared at his father as if he had never seen him before, simultaneously impressed and unnerved at the thought that, after all these years, he still knew so little about him. Chapter 18. In the late afternoon, the sun dipping in the sky, the four contented beachgoers strolled back to the Diver home on Tupelo Street, where Tuesday and her mother took turns showering off the day's sand and salt in the guest bath, while Max and his father did likewise in their own showers. When everyone was fresh and clean, if a bit sunburned in the case of the ladies, dressed in jeans and long sleeves for the evening, and sufficiently hydrated with fresh lemonade, Captain Diver brought out the sangria, for the enjoyment of the adults, of course. Meanwhile, he fired up the gas grill on the back patio for steak kebabs and corn on the cob to go with a Greek salad Maisie was preparing in the kitchen, while Max and Tuesday were charged with setting the dining room table. "Your house is huge," said Tuesday, placing the knives on the napkins to the right of the plates. "You wouldn't think so from the outside. But it just goes on and on." "It's not as big as your place," replied Max, setting out 4 water glasses. "Your house is like a funhouse. I mean that as a compliment." "What's in there?" asked Tuesday, indicating the study door with a flick of damp hair. "Dad's study." "I thought so. Want to see?" "Sure." They entered the large room illuminated by light from the street lamps shining through French doors that led out onto a small private porch. Max switched on the overhead to reveal built-in shelves stacked with books, mostly science and history, Captain Diver's massive mahogany desk overlooked by a framed photo of himself in astronaut gear, and a massive table on which sat the International Space Station. "I got this for Christmas," said Max, pointing out the ladder. "Dad and I built it." "I like it. It's detailed." "What did you get for Christmas?" "Books and clothes mostly. Though technically, we celebrated the winter solstice." "Some kind of pagan thing?" "Wiccan, actually." "Wiccan?" "White witchcraft. Druidism, basically. You know, natural magic." "Why does your mom have a giant tattoo of a thunderbird, Tuesday?" "Well, the thunderbird is also known as the phoenix." "You mean the bird that spontaneously combusts and is reborn from its ashes every so often?" "Exactly. She felt she was reborn a number of years ago when she left the commune and started thinking for herself again." "Is this your mom?" Tuesday had picked up the small framed photo on Captain Diver's desk of Max's mother seated, decked out in full aviator garb, with a sort of whimsical retro flair while sporting her scarab hairpin, in the cockpit of the Rara Avis. "Yeah. She was beautiful. She died tonight. 12 years ago." "I know. It must be a bummer to have that line up with your birthday every year." "It is. But not so much this year. Thanks to you guys. I haven't seen Dad enjoy himself so much, maybe ever." "That's sweet of you, Max. I like your dad a lot. But you look like your mother." "Yeah, I've been told that my whole life." "You've been having dreams again, haven't you?" "Why do you say that?" "Why did I say that?" she asked seriously, with a curious glance at the gold bracelet Max had given her. "It's almost as if I could read your mind." "Fair enough. I've had a few. Want to talk about them?" "One of these days. But not tonight. Tonight I just want to be normal." "Normal?" "I just want to be a regular guy, having a regular birthday." "Hey, it's your party. Want to see my room?" "Of course." After Max showed Tuesday his room, the two friends returned to the kitchen to help with last-minute dinner preparations. As soon as Captain Diver returned from the grill with sizzling kebabs and corn deliciously blackened in the husks, Maisie instructed everyone to join hands around the table for the blessing. "Lord and Lady," she said, "please watch over us and bless us as we eat of your bounty. Bless this sacred food, this gift of the earth, for which we thank you, and bless Max also on this important day in which he becomes a young man in your sight. So mote it be." "So mote it be," repeated Tuesday. "Amen," said Captain Diver. "Dig in, everybody." Over the course of the afternoon and evening together, Max's father and Maisie had acted more and more natural around each other, which made the general atmosphere casual and enjoyable. During dinner, sipping a glass of the burgundy Maisie had brought on top of a glass or two of sangria, Captain Diver's tongue was sufficiently loosened to tell a few stories, which Max had heard before but still found interesting, from his journeys into space, including the one where he saw a UFO, up close and personal, out over the wing of the space shuttle. "What do you mean a UFO?" asked Maisie, whose sunburned cheeks were also slightly wine-flushed. "I mean a UFO. An unidentified flying object. You got a really good look at it." "Yes." "What did it look like?" asked Tuesday. "Like an angel." "An angel?" "That's what I said." "You mean like with wings?" "I mean multicolored light in that shape, yes." "What happened to it?" asked Maisie. "After a minute or two, it just flew off faster than anything I've ever seen. To this day, I don't know what it was. I certainly didn't put it in my report." "Were you frightened?" asked Tuesday. "To the contrary. I felt extremely peaceful." "Astronauts see these kinds of things all the time," said Max. "They just don't talk about them very often." "It's true," said Captain Diver. "Up there you see WSFM constantly." "WSFM?" inquired Maisie. "Sorry. It's an unofficial intelligence community acronym. Stands for Weird Science and Frigging Magic. Like UFOs. You get used to this kind of stuff after a while up there." "I'd love to travel into space," said Tuesday. "Especially if I could see an angel." Captain Diver refilled Maisie's wine glass, then his own. "I didn't say that's what it was. But it could have been." "Sure. Absent a plausible explanation, why not?" "Have you ever seen any UFOs, Max, in your dreams?" asked Maisie. "Max isn't talking about his dreams tonight," said Tuesday. "Really? Why not? Tonight he's a regular boy, having a regular birthday." "I see. Did everyone enjoy the food?" asked Captain Diver. "My tongue was wagging so fast I hardly tasted mine. But the wine was excellent." "The food was delicious," said Maisie. "You can grill out for me any time." "Me too," said Tuesday. "The corn was especially tasty." "That's Max's favorite part as well." "Who would like some rum balls?" asked Max. "My grandmother made them. They're loaded with sugar, but they're fantastic." "I'll try some," said Tuesday. "My pineal gland will recover." "Why not?" said Maisie. "Would anybody else like a cup of coffee?" asked Captain Diver. "We've got a late night. And Snooze here is likely to crash without a little pick-me-up." "Ha ha. Very funny, Dad." "Snooze?" wondered Tuesday. "It's an old nickname," said Max. "Well, if the shoe fits." After some discussion on the merits of coffee, which Maisie insisted, despite its reputation, provided many health benefits when consumed in moderation, Captain Diver drank his black, Maisie sweetened hers with honey, Tuesday added cream and honey, and Max took his with just cream. Meanwhile, Captain Diver asked for Maisie's help in the kitchen, and the two excused themselves. "They're putting candles on your cake," commented Tuesday matter-of-factly. "Probably. Only it's not a cake. It's a pie, a key lime pie, I believe." "How do you know?" "I don't really. It's just intuition. Am I right?" "I have no idea. Dad's been kind of secretive about it. But whatever it is, I'm sure he stashed it in the garage refrigerator." "Key lime pie is your favorite dessert, isn't it?" "Now that you mention it, yes." "Another intuitive hit?" "I guess." At that moment, sure enough, Max's father, singing Happy Birthday with Maisie, walked back in carrying a key lime pie with 12 flickering candles. Max looked at Tuesday as if to say, "Somebody must have told you," to which she shook her head no and shrugged, as surprised as he was, while singing along. He blew out the candles with a deep swimmer's breath, and everybody clapped and cheered. The pie was tart and wonderful. When they had each eaten a piece, feeling stuffed to the gills, in Captain Diver's words, they cleaned off the table and washed the dishes that didn't go in the dishwasher. Before long, they reconvened in the living room to open Max's presents. He opened Tuesday's first. An unmistakable new clothes smell filled his nostrils as he tore open the box and held up a gray sweatshirt with Maroon University in maroon lettering across the chest. Max stared nearly in disbelief, realizing it was the exact sweatshirt, only brand new, before suffering years of wear and tear, from his dream where his 18-year-old self followed his father into the vortex. "Do you like it?" asked Tuesday. It's a great sweatshirt. Where did you get it?" "I ordered it with Mom's help. I sent off for an application this fall, and a university store catalog was included." "You sent off for an application for college?" "Yeah. Why not?" You're in 6th grade?" "So. I just wanted to see what's ahead of me." "That's some serious initiative," remarked Captain Diver, impressed. "She's always been highly self-motivated," said Maisie. "Thanks for this," said Max. "You're welcome," said Tuesday. "I hope you enjoy wearing it." "I'm going to enjoy wearing it right now," he said, slipping it on over his shirt. It was slightly big, with plenty of room for him to fill out. "You look fantastic," said Tuesday. "You really belong at Maroon University." Maisie's present turned out to be a kite, but not just any kite. Still in the box, it was a large, single-string diamond kite, elegant in its design, featuring a vaguely Native American bird motif, a thunderbird. "Wow, that's some kite," said Captain Diver. "This is super cool," said Max. "I don't think I've ever seen one quite like this. I can hardly wait to get this thing in the air." "You really like it?" asked Maisie. "I love it." "Thanks, Maisie." "You're most welcome. Happy birthday." "We'll have to put that thing together and sail it as soon as I get back," said Captain Diver. "Get back? From where?" asked Max. "I've got to fly a mission tomorrow. Just down to Puerto Rico." "Not Cuba." "Not officially. They've actually got you flying a mission on New Year's Day?" "I know. Crappy timing. But I should be back by bedtime. And I assume now that you're officially a man, you'll be okay without your Aunt Nadine?" "I'll be fine, Dad." "I'd invite him to stay with us," said Maisie, "but Tuesday and I are driving up to visit relatives in Atlanta tomorrow." "Thanks. But I really don't mind staying by myself," said Max. "Aren't you going to open my present?" asked Captain Diver. His father's present was only the size of a shoebox, but enigmatically heavy. Max unearthed a generic cardboard box from the wrapping paper, featuring birthday balloons. Opening the box, he wondered if he was dreaming. "What in the world?" asked Maisie. "Is this what I think it is, Dad?" said Max, holding up and examining a pair of sci-fi-looking telescopic goggles with a camouflage design. "If you think they're night vision goggles, yes," his father said. "They're my old ones. But they're still in excellent condition and almost state-of-the-art." "Whoa," said Tuesday. "Those are like spy goggles." "You can spot a mouse at 100 yards in the pitch dark with those babies," said Captain Diver. "I thought you'd enjoy playing around with them." "I've always wanted a pair of these." "Thanks, Dad." "Don't mention it. They're waterproof and practically indestructible, so have at it." Max had in mind to watch something from the Diver's DVD collection before the fireworks, but they never got around to it. The four had way too much fun to veg out in front of the TV, turning off the lights and taking turns finding each other in the dark with Max's night vision goggles. Hide and seek had never been such a blast, for parents and children alike. Everybody came up with some creative hiding places, though none better than when Captain Diver somehow wedged himself behind the washer in the laundry room, but the night vision goggles never failed. Around 11:30 played out, they put aside the goggles, downed some eggnog, put on jackets, and headed back over to Oceanside Beach for the fireworks. "This is going to be really good," said Tuesday, rubbing her hands in expectation as they made their way through the crowd to the water's edge. Being an iconic NASA town, Cape Carnival took its New Year's Eve fireworks display seriously. Standing between his best friend and his father, arm in arm with Maisie, Max was reflecting on how this was his finest birthday, when rockets of every color and description began launching and exploding high overhead. "It must be midnight," said Maisie, kissing Captain Diver on the lips, apparently to his surprise as much as anyone else's. "Happy New Year, everybody." "Who needs mistletoe?" said Captain Diver with a grin. "Happy New Year." "Happy New Year," yelled Max. "Happy New Year," shouted Tuesday above the crescendoing rocketry, giving Max a friendly peck on the cheek. "And happy birthday." "It sure has been." The fireworks went on for nearly half an hour, great pulsing strobes, fiery dandelions and starbursts of light brightening both sky and water. It was hard to tell which was reality and which was reflection, as if there were two displays above and below, going on simultaneously, one in space-time, mused Max, and the other in time-space. In that instant, an image of his mother's face popped into his mind. Smiling, it was very clear and almost tangible, only more aged than in her photographs, set against a backdrop of exotic plants leading up to an adobe casita with a tile roof, as if part of her still lived on somewhere else, naturally growing older with the years. The vision, or whatever it was, ended with the fireworks. When the four revelers returned to Tupelo Street, Max and Tuesday, both yawning, split the sand dollars while their parents said their tender goodbyes beside the Winnebago. "Parting is such sweet sorrow," said Tuesday, quoting Shakespeare while climbing sleepily in the passenger seat, in the fake British accent with which she had first addressed Max that day at school, seemingly years, but really only weeks ago. "Good night, Tuesday," said Captain Diver. "I'm glad you could celebrate with us this evening." "Me too." "I hope to see you again, Captain Diver," she yawned. "What a strange thing to say," commented Maisie. "Sorry. I'm half asleep. I meant I look forward to seeing you again." "Same here," said Max's father. "Thanks for coming, you too," said Max. "We wouldn't have missed it for the world," said Maisie. "Happy birthday." When mother and daughter were gone at last, father and son stood side by side in the humming street lamplight for a long minute, savoring their memorable evening. "Now that's what I call a double date," said Captain Diver. Chapter 19. Bracing himself, expecting to be bewildered, Max followed the creature into the dark cave, where, to his amazement, he could actually see. Not very far and not very well, perhaps, but he was able to make out the enormous humanoid striding, with arms swinging ahead of him, through a web-like network of tunnels. "Please wait," he pleaded. "I have to rest." As the creature stopped and turned around, Max could see its eyes high above glowing a soft red in the surreal twilight that seemed to emanate from the cave walls themselves. "I'm not used to this place," explained Max, hopelessly trying to orient himself underground. "Where are we anyway?" When his companion made no answer, taking a handful of deep breaths, Max motioned that he was ready to continue. "Just not so fast, for God's sake," he said. "You walk like most people run." The creature's only acknowledgement of this request was to slow its pace. Soon, growing accustomed to navigating in semi-darkness, Max got his second wind and was able to keep up without complaining for what seemed hours, until the tunnel began to brighten. Almost imperceptibly at first, then steadily and noticeably the walls glowed brighter and brighter, until they seemed no longer solid but diaphanous like heat waves, mirages of themselves through which he glimpsed the features of an external landscape: trees, streams, hills. The creature stopped again for reasons of its own. Holding out a leathery hand the size of a baseball glove, it indicated with a grunt for Max to take it. Not without trepidation, he extended his comparatively tiny hand, which the creature grasped firmly yet not too hard, at which point there was a sound like wind in tree branches accompanied by a searing flash of light. Max found himself standing alone on a sandy beach beside the bluest water he had ever beheld. The sound he had heard was the breeze rustling the palm trees, and the blinding light was the deep tangerine sun pulsating overhead. There was no sign of Bigfoot, but on the hill overlooking the ocean was a familiar sight: the casita surrounded by tiered gardens in front of which, just a few hours before, while watching fireworks, he had glimpsed a vision of his mother, or rather, his mother if she had lived into her 40s. No one was outside the casita now, as Max made his way up a winding trail flanked by strangely bluish palm trees of an enormous size, and many other plants with shapes and colors that seemed somehow otherworldly. "Wake up, Snooze." Popping up out of his dream like a dolphin clearing the water, Max smelled Old Spice as he came face to face with his father seated on the mattress beside him. I hated to wake you, Max, but I've got to head out. What time is it? Just after 6. Dressed in his flying gear, Captain Diver was literally ready to walk out the door. That's early. I know. You sure you'll be okay by yourself? I'm sure. I should be home no later than 8. I left some cash on the kitchen counter if you'd like to order a pizza, along with Dr. Morrow's phone number in case of emergency. Dr. Morrow? No, I'm not trying to pressure you, Max. It's just that with Nadine out of town and Maisie and Tuesday traveling, I couldn't think of anyone else I trusted. Not to worry, Dad. I've decided I'd like to see Dr. Morrow. Maybe he really could help me understand myself better. Are you certain you want to do this, for you, not because I want you to? I'm certain. Okay. We'll look into scheduling an appointment when I get back, maybe for next week. Sounds good? You behave yourself today, all right? Don't worry. I will. Captain Diver kissed his son's forehead and was almost out into the hallway when Max called after him, Dad? Yes? You be careful down there, all right? Not to worry. Around 8 o'clock that night, after a quiet New Year's Day Max spent reading and watching TV, around the time Captain Diver should have been walking back in the front door, there was a loud knock instead. Max discovered Dr. Morrow fidgeting on the doorstep in a beige trench coat. Peering at the boy from behind his wire-rimmed spectacles, he sighed and said with his slight accent, Do you mind if I come in? Where's my father? Max demanded as Dr. Morrow let himself in and plopped down on the couch still in his coat. That's what I'm here to tell you, Max. Well, would you please hurry? A pained look crossed Dr. Morrow's thin European face. It occurred to Max he looked kind of shaken, and the boy suddenly felt sorry for being rude. I don't know how to tell you this, Max, except to just tell you. Tell me what? As of 1500 hours this afternoon, your father is officially MIA. MIA? Missing in action. Meaning what? Lost at sea with no radio contact. It's possible he'll show back up, but I wouldn't count on it. His plane was totally lost from radar. The Tempest Fugit, lost, was all Max, stunned and in shock, managed to stammer. I'm afraid so, Max. I'm truly, truly sorry. Your father was, my friend. Many more people than just yourself lost a hero today.